Bloodied and barely standing, this guy is blocking a whole squad of hired killers with his bare hands. Their boss just offered to double his pay to step aside. Our boy turns it down flat, because no one ever promised him a single gold coin in the first place. So why is the weakest student in the academy dying to buy time for a girl who might betray him? It all goes back to the day this disowned noble read the notice that stripped him of everything. The ruffian son of a high-ranking noble family sits alone in the study, reigning over the academy like a king, until he looks down at the notice in his hands and wonders if they are actually removing him from the family register. It feels like the god of fate is ridiculing him. Ed Rothleiler. His life. Ed Rothleiler sits on the cold stones while a guard tosses his bags out of the dorm. And the tall academy buildings look very different now that he is standing on the outside. News of his fall travels fast through the academy grounds, where students watch from the shadows and whisper that the noble who rigged his exam is finally gone. He sits on a bench with everything he owns and listens to the crowd call him a failure. It turns out the name Rothleiler doesn't carry much weight once your own family disowns you. This is the moment his life changes forever. This whole situation is unfair. The arrogant noble those students are mocking is gone, and the person left in this body knows how bad things are about to get, where most people would end up as a rich genius or a top-rank hunter. Instead, he wakes up as Ed Rothleiler. This guy is a third-rate villain who gets disowned and kicked out of the dorms the moment the story starts. He's stuck with the worst character at the absolute worst possible time. Ed Rothleiler puts on a desperate show for anyone listening, shouting that none of this is fair and that he has always lived a simple life without a single greedy thought, which only draws pure disgust from the students watching from the path who spit insults at him as a shameless scumbag. The moment the crowd finally clears out and leaves him sitting alone on the garden bench, the performance vanishes into a quiet breath of relief, right up until a glowing stat window materializes to announce the start of his real punishment. He stares down at the numbers in disbelief, watching his intellect crawl across the floor while the stamina sits lower than a random farmer NPC's. It all clicks into place as he remembers his role in the original game. Ed Rothleiler is nothing more than a third-rate minor villain from the early scenarios, a forgettable blur who barely registers before his inevitable downfall. Ed stares into the distance as the truth of his situation lands. The game ending shows his character as a total failure begging for scraps in the credits, which means he has to act fast before he becomes that same spoiled ruffian who died in the streets. He takes a long breath and starts looking for a place to survive. The academy spans the entire Arkan Mountains, built more like a city than a school, stretching out toward the wild, undeveloped forests in the northeast. Ed Rothleiler walked for half a day just to escape the prying eyes of the students, giving him plenty of time to weigh his options. Freshly disowned, he sits alone and tries to make sense of his new reality. Ed Rothleiler finds himself sitting on his luggage outside the academy gates, left behind as the carriage departs after he has just been disowned by his family. Fortunately, even though he was disowned, he has not been expelled from the school yet. That distinction matters entirely. Armed with the knowledge of a dedicated 5-time player of the game, Ed figures that if he just graduates quietly, he can secure a much more comfortable life than the one he left behind. His primary goal is simple: graduation. The immediate problem is the sheer weight of the tuition fees, but since this semester is already paid for, he only needs to secure a scholarship for the next one. Sitting on a rock in the forest clearing with his status window floating in front of him, Ed faces his reality check head-on. He would be lucky just to avoid flunking out. Ed Rothleiler puts tuition out of his mind to focus on an urgent problem, reducing survival to the absolute basics. He checks his trunk to figure out how to avoid becoming a bum this week, concluding that at least his wardrobe is covered. The dorms are shut to him, his reputation kills any chance of a job, and he is left stranded in the woods with no food and nowhere to stay for the night. A nearby stream offers a much-needed moment of relief. Ed has 10 days before school starts, and he knows he needs to make himself ready. He heads into the woods to practice attack spells, calling for a wind blade until the air starts to cut. The physical work hits him harder than the magic, and after only 15 trunks, he ends up on the ground, drained and starving. Can he really only handle 15 trees before his body gives out? He can use magic, but in a body this weak, it just makes the hunger worse. Ed Rothleiler is starving. When hunger gets this bad, the mind starts looking for ways to stay alive that wouldn't make sense to anyone else. Survival has a way of rewriting what you're willing to swallow. Our protagonist remembers a story his grandfather told him about surviving hard times by eating tree bark. He looks down at the wood on the path and decides he's found his dinner. Anything edible is fair game now, so he lights a fire and boils a few pieces in a small pot. He pulls a strip out on a stick and tells himself it looks just like chicken breast if he doesn't look too close. He doesn't hesitate, and as he starts chewing, he looks satisfied. Ed Rothleiler pays the price for whatever he ate, waking up to day 3 with a stomach that refuses to cooperate and a grudge against his grandfather. After a full day of starving and 2 days of throwing up, he reaches a hard conclusion. Wood belongs in houses, not meals. He sets to work on the frame, hammering supports into the dirt until math gets in his way. 4 heavy posts, and only 2 hands to hold them up as the whole structure leans hard against his back. Ed Rothleiler struggles under the physical weight, pushing past his physical limits as he forces out a strain, focusing entirely on tying a secure knot. It is a long way to go, but he makes a pragmatic sacrifice, using what he has since he has no choice. He looks back at his shelter, impressed by his own survival effort, and calling it fierce. Ed Rothleiler catches his breath, caught off guard when a system notification pops up to confirm his first completed project, a basic wood shelter that might keep him safe for a while if he keeps up with the maintenance. The status window lays out his new standing as a novice craftsman with level 4 handiness. Ed stares at the screen, wondering when survival games started following him into reality. Growing up as a noble meant he never had to work with his hands, but seeing that handiness rating gives him his first real surprise of the day. Hunger cuts the thoughts short, reminding him he has bigger problems to solve. Ed Rothleiler stands by the forest stream, his creation complete as the system logs a new project, a simple harpoon crafted from a ceremonial dagger and a tree trunk, pushing him past hunger-fueled desperation into motion. 2 days without food and heavy labor should have stopped him entirely, but sheer willpower keeps him upright with one single craving pushing him forward. Ed Rothleiler pours every ounce of desperate focus into his magic, pushing through the fatigue with a single week left until school starts. He just needs to hold out as he is right now, knowing that if he manages to survive until then, he can get through school without trouble. But that fragile focus shatters when a voice cuts through the clearing, and Lortel Cahellan stares down at him in sheer shock. Ed freezes, caught completely off guard as the reality of who just found him sets in. Princess Fania delivers a cold decree demanding that Ed disappear from the academy, making her irritation clear when she finds him still lingering on the grounds. Taylor McClure stands between a bruised noble and Unica Faylore, while Ed Rothtaylor watches with malicious intent. Ed freezes in absolute terror as Princess Fiona Elias Cloel corners him, activating her unique ability to judge his conspiracy. Ed Rothtaylor sits trapped in a corner, his lies completely unraveled by Fania's insight before he gets tossed out of the academy dorms with his bags packed. Everyone at the academy despises him, but things take a sharp turn when he runs straight into Princess Fania on a quiet forest trail. She demands to know what he's doing here, utterly shocked that the academy hasn't actually expelled him yet, while Ed cautiously explains that he is technically still a student, despite being chased out of the living quarters. Losing her patience entirely, she cuts him off and warns him to leave before she personally demands his expulsion from the academic department. Princess Fania delivers a sharp judgment for setting up a fellow student, but Ed Rothleiler is too devastated by the fish burning on his fire to care. Starving for 3 days, he feels the full weight of his situation. Knowing that Phoenicia's princess actually has the authority to get him expelled, Ed decides to shift tactics as the sun starts to set. Playing the part of a villain, he corners her in the isolated forest, prompting her to prepare for a dangerous confrontation. Princess Phonia demands to know what Ed Rothtaylor means by a threat, but he simply closes the distance and claims he is only trying to thank her. Suspicious, she activates her unique insight ability to test his words, only to receive an absolute shock when the ability confirms there are no lies within what he says. Reeling from the unexpected truth, Ed watches her reaction closely, weighing the heavy influence and fame of the Rothtaylor family he belongs to. The Rothtaylor name sounds noble, but behind those walls sits a pile of bodies from experiments into eternal life. This is a family destined for ruin. Every relative will face either a prison cell or the sharp edge of a guillotine. Ed is the only one who knows the end is coming, and he doesn't mind being the black sheep. He might be cold and hungry, but a plate of burnt fish is still better than a death sentence. Now he just has to convince Princess Phonia of his intent without telling a single lie. He stands on the edge of expulsion, staring down the finality of it. Looking at the timeline, the school year is only a week away, which leaves the question of why Princess Phonia is standing right here in simple clothing without an escort, completing Professor Glass's vicious class placement test to find magic beads hidden in the forest. Naturally, she assumes he is just trying to flatter her when he mentions Class A, until he cuts her off with a single deal. Ed Rothtaylor corners Princess Phonia with a bold wager, where a small grassy island holds Marilda's guardian tree, pointing her towards something hidden away. The memory of the Ed Rothtaylor from 3 days ago lingers as a desperate, shouting noble, a pathetic state Princess Phonia still remembers clearly. However, the Ed Rothtaylor standing before her now in a clean white shirt is entirely different. His demeanor calm and unshakable as he leaves her unsettled by the stark discrepancy. With the class placement test finally over, she holds a glowing orb, searching for the truth behind the present he left behind. Professor Glass stands at the front of the hall and orders the students to present their beads. They show off their prizes, certain that these massive, glowing gems will earn them a top rank. Glass watches the students and then shuts them down. Every student who brought back a powerful bead is starting in Class F. As it turns out, Class A is only for those who understood the trick and found beads lacking magic power. He names the first student who saw through the trap, Zix, followed by Loratel, who watches the room with a confident smile. The names have all been called, and when the professor finally demands the one who found the high magic bead at the guardian tree, it's Princess Phonia who stands. She rises in her academy uniform, accepting the quiet weight of the room as she stands at the very top. The reason why the prideful Princess Phonia will come to be called the Princess of Love begins right after she faces failure during the class placement test, falling all the way to Class F. That single drop changes everything, but Ed Roth Taylor knows the real danger lies in what happens if she finds the golden bead and claws her way back into Class A. The entire scenario of the original story would completely collapse, leaving him with zero margin for error and all his inside knowledge rendered completely useless. Ed Roth Taylor faces a catastrophic realization, convinced he is completely done for, even as Lucy Merrill sleeps soundly in class beneath her oversized wizard's hat with a bubble of drool. Princess Phonia walks with heavy purpose through the hall, focusing her intuition as she tests whether Ed was telling the truth about the bead. She grips the glowing sphere tightly, feeling the full weight of the evidence in her hand. Princess Phonia stops cold with a chilling realization, knowing full well that what lies before her isn't a present at all. Standing alone in the forest, she reflects on the choices that brought her here, dreading the special treatment that would have followed if her royal identity ever leaked, yet stubbornly determined to prove herself on her own terms. Looking at the glowing bead nestled within the roots, she recognizes right away that it will yield the best results in the test, but Princess Phonia simply cannot take it. As she stands by the pond wrestling with her principles and pride, Princess Phonia knows that finding a way forward won't come easily on her own. She walks the righteous path past students cheering for Lucy, ignoring the noise until Ed Roth Taylor steps into her path and drops a heavy wager, telling her she will never make it into Class A and offering his own expulsion if he lies. She processes the weight of the gamble, boiling with insulted determination, and decides to prove him wrong. Princess Phonia is finished watching from the sidelines, and she promises to keep a close watch on Ed Roth Taylor from now on. She sees the danger he shows. His move into Class A means she cannot stop him anymore. While the princess prepares for a fight at the academy, the man himself has a much more urgent problem. Ed stands in the middle of a stream and shouts as he finally spears a fish for his dinner, because out here survival is the only thing that matters. He just keeps moving through the woods and catches his breath as the sun starts to dip below the mountain line. Ed Roth Taylor has to start running from early in the morning to get to school on time, pushing his body to the limit as he struggles for breath, exhausted but determined to make it. But he's back, finally observing the familiar surroundings of Sylvania Academy grounds. At Sylvania Academy, the opening ceremony begins with formal announcements, welcoming students back to campus with a grand feast. Amidst the murmurs in the hall, students stare in open disbelief, watching the red-blazered figure who refuses to be bothered by the attention. Ed Roth Taylor sits completely unbothered, focusing entirely on the meal before him as whispers spread through the room. Students murmur about Ed Roth Taylor's surprising shift in demeanor, focusing entirely on his simple goal to graduate, while Clara pulls Anis away toward a table loaded with desserts from Ophelis. Yet Anis cannot shake a lingering sense of dissonance, watching as the boy she once dismissed seems entirely changed. Today marks the official start of the semester at Sylvania Academy, where Professor Glass opens the morning with a speech about new forms and academic excellence. Ed Roth Taylor finds himself standing outside the dean's office, exhausted and completely drained. It's the very first day of school, and for Ed, the semester is already a disaster. He's barely survived the morning because he was almost expelled before the first bell even rang. Ed didn't expect Phonia to report back to the dean, but the old man's smile suggests he hasn't heard anything too damaging yet. He lets out a long breath of relief, knowing he barely dodged a major complication. This close call is a reminder to keep his head down. If he wants to survive, he has to make sure the story stays on its original tracks. He balances his days between the magic training expected of an academy student and the raw life skills needed to stay alive in the wild. Combining the two makes a bow his most effective tool, allowing him to hunt and defend himself while staying out of reach. Moving forward, his plan is simple. Master his crafting skills until he can produce his own high-quality arrows. Ed stays focused on the grind, sharpening his survival skills while calculating how to weave magic formulas into his arrows to make up for what he lacks in raw power. But the quiet of the woods snaps the moment he senses someone nearby. Just a few yards away, he spots a girl sitting peacefully under a tree, looking every bit the genius spirit sorcerer the academy rumors describe. This is Janica Failover, the top-ranked student of their year, and she doesn't look nearly as dangerous as her reputation suggests. She breaks the silence by asking if he's the amusing guy she's been hearing about, catching Ed completely off guard. Before he can even process how she closed the distance so fast, Janica introduces herself with a bright smile and tells him to use her first name. For Ed, the friendly greeting is a secondary concern. He's too busy wondering how a second-year student managed to move that quickly without him hearing a single step. Janica laughs at how shocked Ed looks, asking if he's surprised she already knows his name. She explains that this forest is the home of a high-ranking spirit named Marilda, and she's heard plenty of stories about him from her. Marilda is apparently a bit nosy, and Janica says it was only a matter of time before she noticed an unwanted visitor like him. The label hits Ed hard. He looks at the dead rabbit in his hand. He's killed so many of them and cut down so many trees just to build this camp. Maybe he really is just a pest in this forest. Janica tells him not to sweat the small stuff, because in the wild, creatures catch and eat each other every day. It's just a natural order, and she promises him that Marilda isn't the type to get upset over a few trees or a meal. Ed scratches his head in embarrassment when she compares him to a big wild wolf with a soft heart. Janica just watches him, the silence between them turning into something much more personal than a chance meeting in the woods. Janica laughs at the surprise of their meeting and shows off her new spirit, but Ed knows the smart move is to play along if he wants to stay on her good side. Instead, he chooses the blunt truth and tells her he cannot see spirits at all. This confession catches her completely off guard, as if the idea of being spirit blind is impossible to her. It is a small moment, but it marks the first time she realizes their worlds are completely different, and Ed just confirms her shock before walking away to find his next meal. Ed knows that his only real edge in this world is his knowledge of the original game's plot. That means he has to keep his distance from Janica Failover, a character so important to the main story that even a small interaction could derail everything. As he hikes deeper into the woods with his gear, Janica stands alone in the clearing and watches him go, her attention fixed on the strange student who seems to have no interest in her. She turns to her unseen companion, wondering out loud if even a wild wolf can have a soft heart. Touching the ethereal fur of the forest spirit Marilda, Janica admits the spirit was right. This guy is fascinating. Standing deep in the Anus forest, Janica Failover watches her high-ranking spirit companion and wonders how Ed could possibly be blind to its presence. He's a mystery she can't quite solve, and his blunt, one-word answers to her kindness have her pouting with genuine frustration. What was yup even supposed to mean? She leans into the soft fur of the great spirit, her annoyance fading into a quiet curiosity that she isn't ready to let go of yet. It's fine. They're both students here, so she'll have plenty of time to figure out exactly who Ed Roth Taylor is. Meanwhile, Ed is looking at a map of the Sylvanian Academy grounds and facing a more practical problem: the long, grueling trek between his makeshift forest shelter and the student area. Ed Roth Taylor pushes himself to the limit, just making it to the academy by dawn, diving into his studies with a stone slab and a burned stick to chase down a scholarship. Even after washing his clothes down by the river at dusk, he still has to sort his firewood, drinking water and suspiciously fishy jerky on just 4 hours of sleep. But the exhaustion isn't what's wearing him down. Turning around on the trail, our protagonist demands to know how long someone is going to keep shadowing him, catching Janica Failover completely off guard as she stammers out her shock that he knew she was there all along. Ed Roth Taylor tries to push her away with aggressive posturing, demanding to know why she keeps hanging around the worst hooligan to exist, but Janica Failover gently dismisses other people's judgment, offering an unbiased clean slate because she doesn't even know him yet. That kindness catches our protagonist off guard, forcing him to remember her true nature, a girl who looks naive on the outside but carries independent strength, right before his foreknowledge reminds him of her tragic future transformation. Feeling the heavy weight of that secret, he stays silent, knowing what waits for her down the road. Janica Failover carries a dark, hidden power beneath her cheerful exterior, but she remains the only person at the academy who ever smiles toward Ed Roth Taylor. Desperate times demand desperate measures, so when he asks for a favor, Janica beams with pure enthusiasm, eager to help a friend. Ed stands topless in the survivalist forest and plays the sympathy card, explaining that his family disowned him and left him in a bind. Her bright expression turns to stone-faced shock the moment he asks for cash, brushing off her reaction while he demands to know the size of her annual scholarship fund. Janica Failover stands at the top of her class, leaving her completely caught off guard and terrified her reputation is crumbling as Ed Roth Taylor watches the impact of his blunt request land with cold calculation. 3 days later, Ed heads back toward his survival shelter while carrying a fresh catch. He's already decided that to survive he has to avoid the main cast and keep the original story on its tracks. Our hero reaches for the branches of his hut and stops dead because his quiet spot has been taken by an uninvited guest. Panic sets in when he sees her. This girl is a powerhouse whose role in the plot is even bigger than Janica's. This is Lucy Merrill, the rare genius of the Academy and the most powerful character in this entire world. He wanted to avoid the main cast, but the plot just found him anyway. Lucy Merrill lets out a heavy yawn in the middle of the mountain valley, startling Ed Roth Taylor, who demands to know what she's even doing out here, only for her to complain that he's the one being too loud and ruining her sleep, before pointing out the actual problem, a massive spirit wolf looming right behind him that's been trying to talk to him this entire time, leaving Ed frozen as the ethereal beast towers over them both. Ed Roth Taylor catches the weight of the demand, feeling the sheer, crushing presence of the spirit towering over him as Marilda delivers the absolute command to save Janica at all costs. Ed thinks he can finally settle into a routine after 2 days at camp, so he heads into the forest to handle chores and stay out of the way. But the Academy has other plans, and a new quest begins for joint combat training, while the entire student body gathers at the arena. These matches are mock duels meant to show off skill using fake weapons. The stands are packed with the heavy hitters of this world, the princesses and genius mages who are destined to lead. But the man at the center of it all is Taylor McClure. He is the real hero of this story, even if everyone still calls him a failure. Ed Roth Taylor is living in a game he already beat, so he thinks he can just sit back and watch the heroes win the Academy tournaments. That changes the second he looks at the match list and finds his own name. Ed watches the duels with a bored look because he knows the future of every fight and knows Zix will use huge power to crush his opponent down on the stage. None of this matters to our boy in the stands. He knows the first-year students will win these matches just like they did in the original story. The peace breaks when Janica Failover pops up next to him with enough energy to fill the entire arena and tells him the official match list is finally ready. She acts like a friendly dog even though he recently asked her for money, so Ed tries to brush her off and says he doesn't care who the Academy paired up for the duels. Then a thought hits him that makes his heart stop. He isn't just a spectator who watches a story play out from the safe seats. He has to step onto that stage and fight for his life too. Ed Roth Taylor looks down at the matchup list, trying to figure out why his name is even on it when Taylor McClure steps forward, determined to give this fight everything he has, having lived through every possible ending as Taylor across countless playthroughs. And while every single route was punishing and hard, he still finds himself silently rooting for the kid. The arena announcement repeats again, and the student looking for Lucy is starting to panic because the match starts now and the top student is missing. He looks down and finally finds her sleeping right under the backup podium while the whole academy screams her name, until Lucy finally crawls out with a lazy yawn. She is the top of the class. Apparently, that rank comes with the right to nap through your own introduction. Across the stage, Taylor McClure is already locked in. Taylor unleashes his first true strike, pushing through the magical resistance and shattering her defense as he catches Lucy completely off guard. Stunned by his speed, he seizes the fatal opening and closes the distance. Surprised by the sudden turn, Lucy hits him with Lightning Strike, an intermediate-level spell that completely overpowers Taylor, earning him the legendary first victory over Lucy Merrill. Down in the Academy dueling arena, the referee calls for the match to begin as Taylor McClure rushes forward with everything he has, forcing Lucy to react instinctively with a massive burst of magic. The blow sends Taylor crashing back against the stone, leaving Janica Failover and Ed Roth Taylor staring in absolute silence as reality refuses to follow the script. The duel ends before anyone can blink, leaving the student body wondering why anyone would charge a top-tier mage barehanded. For Taylor McClure, failure is nothing new. His entire life at the Academy has been a continuous trial as an underachieving student from the country. He hasn't earned a single decent grade since enrolling, trapped as a failure nobody acknowledges, leaving him to drown in their pity. His fingers find the hilt of his sword. Ed watches the scene and finds a strange kind of peace in the middle of all this chaos. Taylor is pushing himself past any limit he's ever known. He is hitting the kind of wall that usually breaks a man. Taylor finds that final spark and launches himself into one last strike while Lucy watches the whole world start to rearrange itself. Ed Roth Taylor calls out to Lucy Merrill, anticipating the exact magic she's supposed to use, only to freeze when something entirely different happens instead. Lucy focuses as her power surges, unleashing a fierce clash against Taylor McClure as Taylor pushes through the pain for a final strike, while a massive spirit roars to life in a blinding surge of energy. Taylor McClure is launched clean through the air by a massive wind vortex, sending shockwaves through the dueling arena as Ed Roth Taylor watches from the balcony in total disbelief. He catches himself, staring down at the impact zone where Lucy Merrill stands in absolute calm amidst the swirling green currents, sealing her victory. The impossibility of the moment lands hard. The boy who was supposed to be invincible just lost, and Ed Roth Taylor is left watching his entire plan turn into a blank page. Victor calls the winner of the duel, Lucy Merrill. The students in the stands stare down at the arena, while Ed Roth Taylor can only whisper a disbelieving name, Taylor. Ed Roth Taylor reels from the impossible result, demanding to know how they lost. Taylor lies on the ground as Ed looks at the fallen hero, and he knows this mess is a problem he can't walk away from. The hero was supposed to have the protection of the wind. But things changed when Lucy joined Ed's side and led him to a contract that makes him stronger than the story intended. There is no time to fix the path because Ed has to face Princess Fania and her cold stare. This is the part where it gets ugly. She looks ready to demand answers about their last meeting. Ed watches from the ground as the battle shifts, leaving Princess Fania startled by the sudden disruption in the arena. He feels the weight of his own interference, knowing that whatever happened in Sylvania, the defeat happened because Ed Ruff Taylor was there. Deciding to intervene manually, he calls out to Taylor, who is walking away completely dazed and shut down from the world. He tells him his efforts will definitely pay off. Though the first person to discover her innate insight was the Emperor himself. Her ability wasn't a divine gift, but rather an acute insight built to detect lies and conspiracies in a royal life riddled with endless intrigue. From within that dark abyss, she forged this sense herself as a means of self-protection. That is why Princess Fania can trust her own judgment, even when the shadowy nobility of the imperial court wears smiling masks to hide their true intentions. She sees through their facades and knows exactly what lies beneath them, stepping up to face Ed Ruff Taylor as he asks her to go easy on him with a warning of her own. The students whisper through the hall about how Ed Ruff Taylor had been yelling at Taylor, calling him persistent while mocking someone who couldn't fight back, but Princess Fania admits that their harsh words are entirely correct, noting how he used his position to embarrass juniors and even tampered with test results when things didn't go his way. Yet, as Princess Fania looks closer, searching for the truth behind his reputation, her attention drifts away as Lucy Merrill sleeps right through the surrounding chaos. Princess Fania struggles to reconcile Ed Rothsayler's notorious reputation with the raw desperation she just witnessed, finding it hard to believe that kind of panic could ever be faked. Down in the combat hall, she watches him with deep skepticism as the match is officially called, while his opponent steps forward to finish this once and for all. She unleashes her opening offensive, forcing Ed into a defensive retreat as he relies on wind and fire to navigate the barrage. She pushes the pace further, wondering how he plans to weather a storm that leaves no room to breathe. Princess Fania commits to the final blow, throwing her full strength into a strike meant to settle the doubt in her heart once and for all. Even Lucy is left confused as the impact lands, slamming Ed into the stone floor with enough force to end the duel on the spot. Our lead doesn't struggle to get back up and just lies there to admit he lost. The admission catches Fania off guard. Why did her massive threat just fold? She saw the path of her own spell and knows he didn't even try to block it. The students in the stands are laughing at how bad the former noble looks. Ed just offers a bow and tells her it was a good fight, leaving the princess standing alone to wonder who he is. Something about Ed doesn't sit right with Princess Fania because he hasn't looked her in the eye once since he arrived. Because the hero of this world, Taylor, matters more in this scenario. Every plan falls apart if the main character goes missing, and right now the guy is nowhere to be found. Ed Ruff Taylor hears his name called out of nowhere, only to find Princess Fania standing in the hallway without a single escort, demanding to know what he is doing out here. When she corners him and asks just what he is, Ed plays dumb, claiming he only learned a lot from the duel, which sets her off entirely as she accuses him of planning to throw the match just to get off the stage quickly. The pressure of the academy is already crushing her, between Lortel Cahellan trying to take over the school, Professor Glass's constant grumpiness, and the strict rules of the royal servants. Ed steps in, placing his hands on her shoulders to stop her. Ed Ruff Taylor tells her to breathe, but the silence only stretches as Princess Fania tries to process what just happened between them, mortified by her own sudden loss of composure and begging him to forget it. Ed is ready to leave the moment she lets go, while Fania admits to herself that living in the palace has left her constantly second-guessing everyone's hidden motives instead of just asking. Regaining her royal composure, she pushes him away and declares she needs to find Taylor, her gaze sharpening as she resolves to finally speak her mind. Princess Fania lays out her theory and blames Ed for bullying the hero to force a break from his family, but while the guess is sharp, his real plan stays hidden. She is right about his family. The young man plays dumb because it is too early for her to learn about those future secrets. Fania refuses to back down and demands to know why he would cheer for a person he was trying to ruin. He offers a weak excuse about wanting to tease the boy. Ed doubles down on the lie with a grin, insisting he's telling the truth even as his nose stretches out, pushing Princess Fania past her limit as she demands he stop playing games while he clings desperately to the original script as his only lifeline, until she finally cools down out of sheer frustration and tells him to go, her gaze catching on the way he keeps staring straight at the door. Ed Ruff Taylor offers a polite departure, caught off guard by the unexpected vulnerability beneath the surface. With so many moving parts and conflicting factions involved in the scenario, our protagonist feels the weight of responsibility for the shifting dynamics, telling Princess Phonia that his own burdens pale beside hers, and advising her to take a breath and rest despite the heavy politics at play, reminding her that this place isn't the palace where every little thing demands constant vigilance. Princess Phonia stands in Sylvania Academy, feeling exposed for the first time as someone sees right through her before Ed Roth Taylor races against the clock, complaining that he lost too much time and calling out to Taylor, who sits defeated. Ed Roth Taylor hesitates, caught in his own head before Ayla Triss steps between them, warning him away as she demands that he leave Taylor alone, drawing a hard line he isn't expecting. Ayla Triss steps forward, warning that Taylor is having a hard time and telling him to stop the harassment, while Princess Phonia looks on with judgment as Ed Roth Taylor stands in the Academy combat stage. A sudden realization hits him, and as Taylor McClure steps up with renewed resolve behind him, he sees the unyielding willpower in his eyes. While Ed Roth Taylor deals with the fallout of his duel, Ayla Triss rushes to Taylor McClure's side. Taylor guards his feelings behind a wall of suspicion, demanding to know why she is even here, but with Ayla by his side, Ed watches the exchange in silence, acknowledging Taylor's skill with the blade. Yet when Taylor confronts him about his true motives, left to reflect on how shallow his own view of the protagonist had been all along. Ed Roth Taylor looks back on his role, feeling a sudden sense of unexpected relief as he realizes that the story staying on track matters less to him than knowing Taylor is still okay. Taylor stares after him in disbelief, annoyed by Ed's composure, while Ed turns away, heading out with heavy footsteps to face whatever trouble comes next. Ed stops and looks back as a sudden noise tears through the air, watching as a massive pillar of fire shoots into the sky. He asks himself if the big moment is starting. Things aren't going by the book now. According to the original story, everyone was supposed to have seen this from their seats at the Nail building. A fire dragon roars out from the heat, but its path is cut short as a magic circle flares in front of it. Lortel Kehelen throws herself into the center of the fight. Ed recognizes her as the Golden Daughter, Lortel, and she doesn't waste a second before trapping the beast in ice. This is the first time he sees her true power in person. It's clear the timeline is broken, but she's more than ready for what's coming. At the Academy combat stage, Janica Failover commands the battlefield atop a massive fire spirit, maintaining a serene yet overwhelming presence during her spar as Ed Roth Taylor notes her power as a spirit sorcerer. Taylor McClure and Ayla Triss watch the display closely, the sheer scale of the trial sinking in. Nearby, Lortel Kehelen braces against the blistering heat as the fire spirit unleashes absolute destruction across the arena. Students swarm Janica to praise her spirit sorcery, while the medical teams carry the injured away on stretchers. It's a massive win for the class, yet the cost is laid out right in front of her. Her classmates hail her as the pride of the sophomores. The weight of those expectations seems to push her shoulders down. Is she really the hero they think she is? The training session ends with a total shift in history, and Ed watches as Janica takes the spotlight that should have belonged to someone else. The original story is dead. Ed Roth Taylor reflects on Janica Failover, figuring that especially since he won't be running into her at the camp anymore. 2 weeks have passed since the joint combat training, and our protagonist is glad to put the main characters behind him to focus entirely on his studies and survival, keeping himself fed with a newly secured fishing net. Working out by the water, he notices his stamina stats climbing as his body physically changes for the better, but he refuses to get lazy yet. That discipline hits a sudden wall, however, when Janica peeks through her fingers, completely flustered by what she stumbled into. Caught off guard by Janica Failover's sudden arrival at his camp, Ed Roth Taylor demands to know what she's talking about as he tries to cover himself, but Janica is too busy looking around the campsite, finding something exciting about his hidden spot that makes her feel like an adventurer. She admits she wanted to talk and needs some advice, catching Ed completely off guard by the request. Thinking back to the joint combat training last month, Janica brings up a heavy memory of someone getting hurt, carrying the weight of an injury she feels responsible for. Ed knows the rules better than she does. Her opponent had broken them by using intermediate-level magic that wasn't allowed, but the good-hearted Janica is too busy blaming herself to care about the unfairness of it all. Everyone at the academy loves Janica, but that is the problem. When she feels guilty, everyone tells her what she wants to hear. So, she goes to Ed, the one guy she knows will tell her the truth. Janica can't stop thinking about what happened, sitting by the fire and asking Ed if she should apologize, but he tells her to do it if she thinks it is right, catching her off guard. Everyone at the academy takes her side, but she knows that having people in her corner doesn't fix her mistakes. That is why she sought him out, because she needed someone who wouldn't tell her what she wanted to hear. Stretching out her weariness by the campfire, Janica Failover tells Ed Roth Taylor that he never takes her side unconditionally, and when he answers that he can't help if that offends her, she waves her hands frantically to clear up the misunderstanding. She tells him she doesn't feel offended at all, noticing how much he has changed since last year. Beneath her bubbly exterior, she is observant enough to see that even when he needed money, he never showed the usual desperation, instead keeping his distance. But those sides of Ed offer a strange reassurance. Sitting by the warmth with a soft smile, she wishes everyone in the world was like him. As night falls over the academy grounds, the stars break through the dark sky while the next day arrives to reveal the sweeping stone and red roofs of Sylvania Academy, his mind racing as he realizes that while The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania is praised as a masterpiece, its ending remains completely out of reach for almost everyone who plays it, especially when newbies run headfirst into early bad endings. Taylor enters the trigger event, stepping right into the danger zone where a shadowy assassin waits in the dark to end it all. Every wrong choice carries a heavy cost, leaving Elatrice to struggle through a helpless descent while Lortel Cahellan watches the horrific sacrifice unfold with cold detachment. Ed Roth Taylor tries to break away as Lortel calls out to him, demanding to know if he is listening. But Ed turns on her, demanding to know how long she plans to keep following him right into the line of fire. The story opens with the Golden Daughter herself, Lortel Cahellan, stepping into the academy hallway with a knowing, confident smile as she initiates a direct business transaction, looking to buy 2 hours of time from Senior Ed, asking to buy 2 hours of his time while his mind drifts back to the game's complex hero system where she sits as the hidden choice opposite Princess Fania. Unlike the main princess, Lortel was cast in the villain's role from the start, hiding a deep loneliness behind her schemes until the story forces players to choose between them. Snapping back to the present as Lortel calls out to him again, our MC reminds himself that he cannot afford to fall for her words right now. Ed knows Lortel is playing a game, and if he follows her lead, he'll lose the initiative, so he tries to ignore her begging until she stops being fake. He isn't making it easy. She keeps up the act anyway. She stays right by his side and calls his hard work an inspiration despite his current situation, laying it on thick. She even jokes about how self-centered he can be until the act finally drops and she makes an offer. She shows 3 gold coins as a deposit to talk about his growing friendship with Janica. This is the part where it gets serious. It was never about help. It was about information. Flashing 3 gold coins that could easily equal a month's earnings for some, prompting Ed to ask if the Golden Daughter plans to buy connections. Lortel tells him to keep the coins for now, knowing something more, and steps close into his personal space. Ed pockets the coins, figuring that having more allies is always better, while realizing that she instinctively grasps the coming political struggle against Princess Fania for control of the academy. Lortel Ketchel sizes up her next move while Princess Fania stands nearby, but the tension breaks when Ed Roth Taylor agrees to terms, offering a formal handshake to seal the deal. Lortel reflects on the merchant world, noting how people who have known only wealth find that a single moment of poverty is enough to crush their heart entirely. She observes Ed's fallen status, remarking that small amounts of money often become the downfall of those facing hard times, where desperate men will sell everything they have for a single gold coin. Standing alone on the academy grounds, she looks down with a quiet, lingering sense of irony at how easy it is to prey on the desperate. Ed looks at the gold in his hand and knows this is the part a desperate man has to play. It is a show that Lortel finds entertaining, and she watches him leave with the sharp interest of a merchant who just found a new toy. He walks away through the academy gates. Part of him regrets losing the money that would have made his life easier, but the risk is just too high. Getting caught between power players like Janica is a horror he isn't ready for. If he wants to survive, he has to keep the original story on track at all costs. Under the quiet night of Sylvanian Academy, Lortel Ketchel spots Yenica Phalor in the hallway, greeting her with a disarming smile as Yenica notes her loose hair. Lortel recalls the uproar over her use of forbidden intermediate magic during the joint combat exercise, using the lingering bandages on her arms to draw sympathy and set up her next move. Lortel Ketchel tries to brush off her injuries with a reassuring smile, but Janica Phalor catches her completely off guard by bringing up Ed Roth Taylor out of nowhere, only for Janica to casually reveal her secret network, surrounded by elemental spirits who love to gossip about conversations happening all around the northern part of the forest. Lortel realizes her hidden interactions with Ed have been fully exposed. Looking back at how Ed had tried to buy her help with gold coins, she finds herself completely dwarfed as Janica leans in to deliver a sharp lesson on the value of true sincerity. Lortel considers the meager bribe Ed offered her, noting that his simple honesty hits harder than any mountain of gold. Even as the girl tries to play it off as a joke, the merchant is already modifying her evaluation. She watches Janica walk away, listening to the casual mention of high-ranked spirits until the girl pauses at the door and lets the mask drop to apologize for the pain she caused last time. This isn't a person who's oblivious to the world. Janica sees every dark corner of it, but she's strong enough to choose to smile anyway. Janica Phalor maintains her cheerful personality, though the heavy wooden doors behind her feel heavy with unspoken tension. Lortel Ketchon stands alone in the dim corridor, crossing her arms as she mutters under her breath that this is hard. Out at Ed's forest camp, the morning laundry hangs quietly under the sky until Lucy Merrill catches a strange scent in the air and stops to sniff. A sudden blast tears through the clothesline, leaving Ed Roth Taylor staring in frustration at his ruined work, before he senses someone watching and turns around to look. Standing right there with quiet composure is Belle Maya, the senior maid of Ophelis Hall, reminding our protagonist of the day she threw him out with his luggage. Belle Maya finds Ed Roth Taylor out in the clearing, noting that while Lady Janica has talked about him living here, she hadn't expected his living conditions to be quite this rough. Ed tries to play it off, thinking back to the elite maids of Ophelis Hall and wondering what kind of rare forage goods she has packed away in her basket, valuing her practical knowledge of the forest. But as she tells him to drop the formal attitude, our protagonist is already running through his game knowledge to figure out how her presence fits into the wider plot. Belle Maya offers to let Ed treat her like a servant again, but he shuts her down and tells her he won't talk down to someone who works that hard. He's already done the math. This maid has no impact on the main story, so turning her into an ally is a cheap way to gain some goodwill. He shifts the focus to the basket and suggests they become friends, since they're both just extras. It pays off, and he walks away with knowledge on which forest plants are safe to eat. His survival skills are growing as he finishes his first project by installing a functional fish net in the stream. With plenty of meat drying on racks and fish secured in the traps, Ed Roth Taylor casts his ignition spell to boil the pot while reflecting on the grind that brought his basic skills to level 10. That proficiency turns routine cooking into a reliable survival tool, as proven by finishing his entire day's work well before the sun sets. Ed Roth Taylor enjoys a rare moment of peace with a warm drink until a sudden flash in the sky shatters the quiet. A massive pillar of light tears through the ground, throwing him hard against the debris. He stumbles through the smoke and rubble, staring at the wreckage in total disbelief, mourning the loss of his camp. Ed Roth Taylor catches his breath, fully aware that the close call nearly killed him. Amidst the wreckage, Lucy Merrill sits protected within a blue magical aura, exhausted from the ordeal. Spotting her in the debris, Ed calls out in shock. Lucy sits dazed in the wreckage, trying to process the sudden impact. Our protagonist catches his breath, complaining that the blast nearly killed him, while the world-class mage looks at him with sheer disbelief at his dramatic tone. She mumbles the name Belle Maya, recalling how the senior maid had been in a foul mood over a missed class, swinging with enough force to prompt a desperate teleport escape. Standing near the massive crater, she admits she expected more of a struggle. The realization of his destroyed work completely shatters his temper. Unbothered by the chaos, she only asks if he has any beef jerky, pushing our protagonist past his absolute limit. Ed demands to know what kind of life Lucy is living, but she just sits there recovering from the exhaustion of her massive spell, asking if he really did run out of magic, leaving him to indulge in petty vengeance for his destroyed house. He settles a score on Belle Maya's behalf, but quickly pivots back to survival planning, heading to the library to research wood finishing and roof construction for his next home. The library is closing. A girl in Twin Tails mentions his hard work, and after Ed apologizes for losing track of time, she introduces herself as Elka Islan. The silence hangs between them because he realizes she's waiting for his name, so he offers a nickname before he finally drops the full weight of the truth. He is Ed Roth Taylor. The world in the library shifts the second the name lands. Notoriety is hard to shake on a campus like this. Ed expects the worst, but Elka cuts through his cynicism with genuine admiration for the sheer volume of elemental texts he has plowed through, while everyone else dismisses him based on rumors she knows aren't true. Seeing his sincerity, she offers him unexpected encouragement, leaving Ed completely stunned as he packs up to head back to his dorm. The library is coming apart around Ed Roth Taylor and Elka Islan as the building starts to shake, and Elka freezes when books tear off the shelves and fly toward her like a wave. As a massive pillar of light erupts from the Academy Center, it signals the start of a showdown that finds students trapped in a camp at 11:30. Taylor and his friends have worked for months to pull everyone into one place to keep them alive. They watch the shadows and wait for the first attack. It gets worse from here. 2 hours into the Academy's worst nightmare, the survivors finally realize they aren't just fighting a disaster, they're fighting a legend. 2 hours have passed since the disaster began. Ayla Triss looks at the sky and recognizes the ancient magic from her studies. It is a summoning rune for Glaskin, the highest spirit of darkness. Princess Phonia knows this makes things desperate, because only one person on campus has a spirit connection strong enough to pull this off. The culprit is Janica Failover, the star student who somehow lost herself to the darkness. There is no time to mourn a fallen friend. If Ayla is right, the current barrier is just a countdown until the summoning finishes. Taylor McClure calls for the group to move toward the student center before the casualties start to climb. Claire hopes for outside help, but Elvira Aniston reminds him that they are the only ones left to solve this from the inside. As Elvira Aniston tries to rally the group, Clebius pushes back against the plan, but Taylor McClure remains fixed on the mission to push past the intermediate spirits and take down the spirit boss inside, until Clebius stops them cold with a warning about what's waiting for them. Two high-rank spirits, the Berserk Fire Spirit Tarkan and the Dark Spirit Velocipher, making the whole mission a suicide run. Lortel Ketchum questions how a second-year student could possibly summon Glaskin while managing all these spirits at once, until Ayla points out the likely truth. Senior Janica isn't the source of the power. Spirits of darkness stand as the natural enemies of a spirit sorcerer. The demons that actually take control of these sorcerers become the reason they live in constant fear, turning the sorcerers into mere prey. Yet how Senior Janica, the most remarkable student in spirit studies, ever managed to command a presence like Velocipher remains a mystery to everyone, though Zix Effelstein cuts right through the speculation. What matters right now is not how it happened, but what they choose to do next, and Zix knows the final call belongs to Princess Phonia, who stands silent under the crushing weight of leadership. As Princess Phonia feels the heavy weight of command hanging over the courtyard, she weighs her options against the silent crowd. Then Ed Roth Taylor's unexpected perspective cuts through the tension. Whatever burden he carries can't match hers, so why not find some peace of mind? The reality of leadership settles in, and she makes a decisive call, announcing that only her guard, Claire, alongside top students from each class who have proven their ability, will join the entry after an hour, telling everyone else to prepare and toughen their minds. Stepping forward with absolute resolve, she declares that she will take the responsibility. Before the choice can settle, an attendant arrives to report that the assessment of the resident employees in the teaching area is complete. An attendant rushes in with urgent bad news. The Audrey Hall and Potion Archives are locked in the middle of a strike, and it is unlikely they will join the cause. Princess Phonia weighs their limited options in the quiet room, realizing they stand alone as the only ones capable of taking proper action, until a voice cuts through the tension to announce there is still one student left behind in the library. The purple-haired apprentice librarian hurries over to report that her friend Elka Islan and a sophomore are trapped inside the student library surrounded by danger. Zix Effelstein stops dead at the name, demanding confirmation as the panic sets in. The apprentice confirms they share an apprentice librarian class together, learning how to manage grimoires. Realizing Elka is entirely powerless to defend herself, Zix immediately resolves to rescue her right now. As Princess Phonia tries to keep the group focused on subduing the immediate threat of Senior Janica, Zix Effelstein struggles with his helplessness, demanding to know if there is really another student trapped in the library. When he snaps under the pressure of the worry, the terrified purple-haired girl is forced to name who is trapped inside. The realization hits Zix like a physical blow when he hears the name. She tries to excuse her laziness by explaining that she left Ed Roth Taylor alone with Elka because he had been sitting there late at night and she simply didn't care about the rumors surrounding him. The rest of the students immediately fuel the panic, leaving Zix at his absolute breaking point. Elka Islan calls out to Zix Effelstein, desperately urging him to stop, and tries to hold her ground by asking him to trust in him instead. Ed Roth Taylor stands completely drained alongside Claire and Lucy Merrill as the scale of the magic sinks in, leaving Elka to realize her plea has failed. Zix remains entirely consumed by protective rage as sudden magical violence erupts before Princess Phonia, Lucy, and the purple-haired girl. The monsters surge forward with a sharp cry, pushing Zix Effelstein to his absolute breaking point as he warns that if anyone touches so much as a hair on Elka's head, he'll unleash total destruction. He means every word of it, locking his sights entirely on Ed Roth Taylor. The term rags to riches isn't nearly enough to describe how miraculous the existence of Jix, known across the northern grasslands as the Spear of Grass, really is. Tracking his target through the brush, our hunter reads the signs left on the bark and judges it an adult male. Hyper-focused on the prey, he finally spots him moving through the clearing. Up in the northern expanses where the voice of the Empire cannot reach, Jix strikes with lethal intent. Out here, you check your own neck just to make sure it is still attached. Jix was born to nomads and separated from his family at a young age. He learned to kill for food before he could even read, scavenging from roadside corpses because no one taught him how to trade. To him, the world is just a place to find his next meal. But as he drags his kill through the academy town, the locals pull back and whisper about barbarians who eat human flesh. The rumors don't bother him. He keeps walking. He knows their fear is just noise that won't keep him alive. The life of a beast starts with silence, but Elka Islan leans in close to ask his name, getting nothing back from Jix until she says it herself, knowing the kind of stranger standing in front of her. Academy Town holds a lot of people, but Elka Islan looks right at him and offers a bright, innocent thought, and that is when Jix feels it hit him. A life spent endlessly roaming the vast northern prairies. Elka's voice pulls at him, asking if he's all right, but his mind is already slipping back to the dirt. He was just an abandoned wolf pup back then. He scavenged for carcasses on the side of the road with only the moon for a roof. The blood on his face and the memory is a reminder of how much it cost to stay alive alone. He didn't even know what loneliness was until he finally found a reason to stay. Everything changed the moment Elka and her father found him and welcomed him into their family, giving him a home where he didn't have to fight for every scrap of food. The savage life became a distant memory the moment he traded the wild for something worth protecting. But when monsters close in and raw violence is the only language left, he knows exactly what he has to do. Rumors can kill a reputation faster than a blade. At this academy, the name Ed Roth Taylor is poison. Most students see him as a cheater who insulted a princess and spends his time preying on juniors, which makes everyone at the academy hate him. That hatred is why Zix Effelstein is sprinting through the academy hallways with desperate urgency. He pushes his body until his breath hitches, driven by a goal he can't ignore until the job is finished. When Zix finally corners him and shouts his name, Ed just stares back through a mess of bruises and blood. He doesn't look like the monster from the rumors, and he doesn't seem to recognize the man who hunted him down. He just asks who Zix is. Zix Effelstein demands to know where Elka is, forcing Ed Roth Taylor to give up the location before collapsing from exhaustion in the corridor. Bursting into the reading room on the third floor, Zix finds Elka Islan lying unconscious on the floor. He checks for a pulse, but as the relief settles in, a sudden realization stops him cold. Noticing the blackout curtains drawn tight against the spirits outside. Moving deeper into the room, he spots a written message left behind, an urgent warning telling Elka to stay put, block the entrance, and avoid provoking the spirits until dawn. Looking at the fortified study, he realizes someone went to great lengths to shield her, and the blood on the surface doesn't belong to Elka at all. Following the trail of blood straight to the heavy doors, Princess Phonia stops as the reality of what lies beyond hits her. Sitting slumped against the base of the statue, completely spent and battered, is Ed Roth Taylor, leaving her to wonder why on earth he pushed himself this far to protect Elka. Bruised and barely conscious, our MC mutters in frustration at how close he was. 2 hours earlier, inside the Academy library, the chaos erupts as a sudden surge shatters the quiet. Ed Roth Taylor carries Elka Islan through the hallway, noting the glowing summoning rune outside that marks the start of the Glaskin showdown. He figures Taylor will handle the situation and decides to stay away from where the key characters gather, determined not to let the future change. But time is short, and since berserk low-rank spirits will soon swarm the area, our protagonist starts blocking the entrance to perfect his shelter before pausing with a sudden realization. What makes Janica Phalor's powers exceptional is her mastery of spirit understanding and connection, two stats that grow through direct contact with spirits. Ed stares into the light and weighs the gap between his own luck and the natural talent of others. Growing his spirit stats has always been a dead end. He can't even see the spirits, let alone interact with them. But the chaos outside changes the math. Janica is forcing the spirits to take physical form. That means they aren't just ghosts anymore, they're targets. Ed sees a once-in-a-lifetime chance to feed his stats, and he's not about to let a meal like this go to waste. He launches himself into the middle of the swarm, moving with a speed that surprises even him as he tears through the pack. This is the part where he stops playing it safe. Ed reaches his absolute limit, pushing ignition to level 12 and spirit magic to level 7, stopping just one level short of a spirit contract because going further would have been fatal. That was when Zix finds him in the hallway, carrying the unconscious Elka over his shoulder and stopping at the sight of Ed's battered resting form. Ed offers a thin excuse of training, but Zix just laughs, recognizing the familiar heavy truth of a man who has always driven himself past the edge. Ed can only listen as the man reads him completely. Zix Effelstein tells Senior Ed that he truly owes him a big one, making a solemn vow to repay the debt at any cost. Ed Roth Taylor remembers that Elka Islan is Zix's lover, a minor detail he had forgotten from the setting, but he quickly reconsiders Zix's importance as Taylor's lifelong trusted friend. Ed tells him to return since Elka is safe and he doesn't belong here. Ed instructs him to go help Taylor McClure, leaving Zix surprised as Ed describes Taylor as the guy who is always barely avoiding failures. Zix finds it strange that Ed is putting so much faith in Taylor. For Ed, this isn't about friendship. It's about how the fighters match up and the game rules he knows by heart. The fire spirit Tarkin has a shell that only Taylor's element slash can break, so Ed has to force that skill out now if the game's hero is going to win. Zix accepts the advice and starts to carry the girl away, leaving Ed to rest against the wall and hope he's done enough to nudge the story back to its original tracks. It's a dangerous assumption, but it's the only one he has. Then the logic fails. Ed freezes as a sudden, terrifying thought lands. A single detail from their talk catches in his mind, and the whole plan starts to come apart. Zix and Taylor are supposed to be friends by now. In the original game, they build that bond through a brutal duel where Taylor learns his signature move, but that fight never happened. The timeline is moving too fast, and the most important friendship in the academy doesn't even exist. Ed's presence changed everything, and now the butterfly effect is starting to sting. Taylor never learned the element slash, so the raid team is missing their only way to win and can't even scratch the boss Tarkin. The beast lunges at Ayla while the story Ed once knew falls to pieces, and back at the student center, the base is a reminder of a plan that's already dead. Zix steps up to take responsibility for his late arrival, but Princess Phineas shuts him down, admitting the raid was lost before it even began. Even with a heavily battered leg, Captain Claire tries to push through the pain to join the next wave. With their top student injured and no time left to track down Tarkin, the mission spirals into pure despair. A heavy silence settles over the survivors as failure finally sinks in. Then Phonia looks up at the summoning ritual, and whatever stands before her shatters the last of their chances. Ed Roth Taylor knows he has no choice left, stepping directly into the main plot as he takes charge of one side and splits the raid team in two. The final boss is waiting, and the students are already at their limit. Then the one person who shouldn't be here walks out of the shadows. Ed Roth Taylor looks like he barely survived a war. He doesn't hesitate for a second as he tells the group they need to divide their forces. The sight of him stops everyone cold. Princess Phonia stares at him as if she's seeing a ghost, because the man who was supposed to be long gone is standing right in front of her. This is the moment the whole chapter has been building to. But Taylor doesn't care about the miracle. He's angry, and he asks Ed if he really thinks their life or death fight is just a game. Ed steps in to cool the room and tells Clebius he needs to hear the whole plan before he shuts it down. The mission is simple but terrifying. They have to push past the fire spirit and reach the dark spirit that's taken control of Janica. Fighting Tarkin head-on is a losing game because of its thick shell, so Ed suggests they skip that fight. He wants to split the group into two teams, with one group baiting the dragon while the others rush the training grounds. Lortel isn't convinced. She warns him that if the lure fails, the dragon will trap everyone against the dark spirit and wipe them out at once. The plan is a dangerous gamble, but Ed tells her that weighing risks is something they can't afford right now. Janica is the only target that matters. Clebius finally asks the question hanging over the whole group: who is going to be the bait? The atmosphere turns heavy as the group discusses the grim nature of the assignment, prompting Taylor to step forward and volunteer. But Ed Roth Taylor shuts the impulse down, telling him to fall back because he's assigned to the main combat grounds. Taylor tries to argue that he is quick enough to handle the risk, but Ed stands his ground, making it clear that they aren't looking for sacrificial lambs or even a strict half-and-half split of forces. Ed names the three who will handle the lure team: himself, Lortel Ketchum, and Clebius, sending Clebius into an absolute panic while Lortel politely declines. As Ed tries to explain that there is a specific way to bind Tarkin's feet, Lortel asks how. Clebius screams that he'd rather die than fight alongside Ed Roth Taylor, and Ed feels the clock ticking down on their shrinking window of time. Ed watches her face and admits that for once, what she's saying makes sense. Phineas still can't tell what he's really up to, but she can't afford to doubt him anymore. She uses her royal title to command the party to split, sending the main force to handle the heavy lifting while Ed lures Janica into the open. There is no time left for a speech, and the princess leaves them with one last order: do not die. Princess Phania drives her team forward with absolute resolve, leading them straight into Nail Hall Corridor, where Lortel Ketchum questions how anyone plans to stall a fire lizard like Tarkan. But Ed Roth Taylor asserts complete authority, telling Lortel to follow his lead because they will win. Ed reassures a terrified Clebius, placing heavy trust in the top freshman combat student, while Clebius reels from his audacity, wondering if Ed actually has a way through this after all. Behind the heavy doors of the combat training grounds, Clebius recounts the stakes, warning that Janica Failover waits inside. He questions his own resolve, remembering how the princess's firm attitude convinced him to come all this way. But standing alongside others, a small spark of courage takes hold as he braces himself for what lies ahead. Tarkin and Taylor stand ready, and the moment the threat looms into view, panic instantly overrides his newfound courage as he scrambles to figure out how to draw him out. Clebius freezes at the sudden realization as the danger locks onto him, sensing the massive beast towering directly behind him. Panic takes over as he bolts down the courtyard, shouting that he's been tricked and demanding to know why this is happening to him. He vents his raw rage into the empty night, screaming that he hates this world and everyone in it, while Lortel lets out a long breath in relief. Ed watches him run toward the Nail Hall corridor, telling Lortel to pull back now that the trap is set and the hard part is done. Lortel observes the cold execution of the strategy, noting that sacrificing Clebius will bring heavy moral criticism, but Ed rejects the label entirely. Ed Roth Taylor defends Taylor despite his rough exterior, noting how resilient the top student is before turning his attention to Lortel Ketchum with a high-stakes assignment. Outside Nail Hall, he places her in charge of securing the entry path for the subduing group and landing a critical strike on Tarkin. Lortel replies with playful skepticism about trusting rumors, summoning floating magic circles around her. Ed acknowledges that while everyone else will likely hesitate and doubt themselves, she excels at this kind of ruthless work. With a blunt command to blow it up, Lortel unleashes a devastating magical assault that tears through the corridor and shatters the surrounding stonework. Standing amidst the falling debris, Lortel surveys the total destruction she just wrought. Princess Phonia, Taily, and Elatrice demand to know what's happening as Lortel Ketchum casually brushes off their shock and declares she has to go in. Looking back on the joint combat training where she blew up Nail Hall's ceiling with forbidden intermediate rank magic, she realizes Ed Rothtailor chose her for this exact ruthlessness because he knew she would pull it off. Filler. With the entry path successfully opened, the raid party slips inside while Lortel braces herself for the complications still ahead. Clebius screams out in desperate fury, vowing to kill both Lortel and Ed for what they pulled, knowing full well that even if the raid party slips past Tarkan, she and Clebius will still be left to deal with the monster running loose. In the student plaza, Clebius runs for his life from Tarkan, begging anyone to save him. Ed Rothtailor watches the terror, pointing out that running is impossible and apprehension is the only way. Tarkan's defense is absolute, and since Ed already lost to him once in practice, no raid party member can even scratch him. Pulling out a pouch, Ed tells Lortel Ketchum to gather her mana to deal with the shell. Moving fast into position, Lortel casts a massive defensive spell alongside Clebius. Without Elemental Slash, no one else in the raid party can crack Tarkan's shell, leaving the beast to smash it straight through the ice barrier. Moving with desperate urgency, Ed Rothtailor realizes what the crisis demands and spots his target deep in sleep on the ground while reviewing the game mechanics he has manipulated countless times before. Lucy Merrill wakes up complaining about the shaking and wanting another nap, while Belmaya radiates menace over an exhausted Janica Faelor because Lucy ran away and burned through her magic. And snaps awake, but Ed Rothtailor wastes no time on pleasantries, force-feeding her a handful to build back her mana before pointing out their target, the flaming fire lizard. Reviewing his distance, our protagonist trusts his old skills and yells for everyone to get down as he launches Lucy headfirst into the fray against Tarkan. Lucy lets out a scream, sobbing through the betrayal because the plan is just too cruel for her to handle. Her voice echoes across the academy grounds while Ed watches the fallout from his balcony. This is where the play ends, and the real power shows up. A bolt from the sky pins the spirit dragon to the stones, followed by a pillar of light that swallows the entire courtyard and rewrites the air itself. Lucy throws up a barrier just in time to shield the nearby students. Their screams are lost in the roar of the impact. Even from his perch, Ed has to lock his fingers around the stone railing to stay on his feet, holding on until the wind stops. It's a lot of power for one plan. The moment is the turning point, because even though Tarkan is a high-rank fire spirit with a shell too tough for a direct assault, Lucy's high-rank magic has shattered his defenses. His attacks can finally land, and he means to claim the final hit and all the experience left behind. Back in her memories, alongside voices of friends and professors praising her reliability, her combat skills, and her status as the hope of the sophomores. Everyone leans on her, but the endless pressure shatters her from the inside, forcing her to endure the pain just to keep playing the dependable genius. Then the shockwave hits, and Taily surveys the scene as the vanguard finally assembles together. Bound in dark purple chains with glowing red eyes, Janica Faelor maintains a forced smile as she acts as a conduit for Tarkan. Ed Rothtailor checks his footing outside Nail Hall, calculating the remaining time before dawn, and moves into position just as Lortel Ketchum coordinates the struggling party. As Lortel asks about Lucy, Ed notes she is resting nearby, and they resolve to finish the fight themselves. Running low on magic after propelling 2 ice spears, Ed Rothtailor points out that they need to slice the enemy's throat directly, though Lortel Ketchum suggests that Clebius, who carries a blade, might be better suited for the task. Clebius, trapped in a panic, can only scream for help and offer desperate apologies, leading Lortel to immediately write him off as an option. Lortel insists on taking responsibility to end it herself, asking Ed to hold the monster still just this once while she bets her life on him, but Ed remains skeptical of her dramatic framing. Standing before the massive dragon like Tarkan and its roaring purple flames, Ed dismisses her framing as a blind gamble, while Lortel counters that a life is too expensive to gamble with. Turning the risk into terms she understands, Ed frames it instead as an investment, prompting a knowing smile from the Golden Daughter as she accepts the proposal. Lortel acknowledges the sacrifice and manifests a lethal halo of sharp ice crystals, stepping straight into the combat zone while Clebius breaks down completely, leaving Ed to assess the exhausted monster before him and understand the terror freezing the other student in place. Tarkan looms over the arena, but Ed pushes forward to find his opening. a massive spike in mana hits Ed like a physical blow, drawing his eyes toward a huge arm of dark energy that starts to form over the arena while Janica freezes in shock. Ed knows Taylor's party has reached the final phase of the fight. However, the timing is a disaster for anyone trying to stay hidden, as a summon this big will draw every eye at the academy. While the sky burns, the spirit Tarkan unleashes a blast that swallows the entire field in a wave of heat. This is the part where it gets ugly. Lortel Ketchum gives the final signal, knowing that Lortel doesn't make any mistakes. Tarkan reacts to the sudden shift in the battle, bracing as the momentum turns. Ed Roth Taylor steps forward to unleash his full power and end the fight, entirely focused on the perfection of a technique he has honed through endless repetition. With absolute precision, he delivers the final blow. The high-rank fire spirit, Tarkan, goes down, triggering a surge in spirit magic proficiency and understanding, while unlocking a brand new spirit contract slot that allows our protagonist to finally bind a spirit. But the quiet doesn't last, because Glaskin's right-hand man descends over the academy grounds with overwhelming force, unleashing a crushing wave of magical energy that changes the entire weight of the night. Descending straight down to crush the academy, Taylor meets him head-on with a final, desperate strike, fulfilling his role as the hero to the very end. Down below, Ed Roth Taylor, Lortel Ketchum, Princess Phonia, and Lucy Merrill watch the final explosion light up the grounds. Under the shade of a large tree on the academy grounds, Lortel Ketchum reflects on the false bravado of those who claim to risk everything, pointing out to Ed Roth Taylor that most of them turn out to be cowards. Ed questions her assessment, prompting Lortel to tease his lack of sentiment after surviving a life-and-death crisis together. Deciding it is time to formalize their bond, she formally introduces herself and offers a handshake. Ed takes her hand in greeting, only to realize a moment too late that he has just been slipped a bribe, as Lortel quietly tells him she won this round. Lortel makes it clear that catching Ed off guard means he owes her a favor now. She leaves him with a tease, but Ed is already deciding how to keep his distance from someone that dangerous. Before he can even think, the sound of heavy boots hits the pavement, and Taylor approaches with a look of pure resentment that fits the legendary hero Ed remembers. The tension is thick. Taylor forces himself to bow and offers a word of thanks because even for an enemy, a hero's debt has to be paid. He clearly hates every second of it, but his honor won't let him ignore what happened. Clebius loses his mind, screaming that a backstabber like Ed doesn't deserve a shred of respect until Princess Phoenia tells him to shut his mouth before he makes a bigger fool of himself. Princess Phoenia wants to reward Ed with a spot on the student council, but he turns it down and points toward the heroes who deserve the credit. He makes sure she knows Lucy and Taylor were the ones who killed the monsters. Alvira teases him for tossing away the praise, but Zig scolds her for being rude to a senior. Seeing them all together like this brings a small smile to Ed's face. He spent years watching these heroes from behind a screen, but seeing them solve their own problems in person is different. Watching Taylor and Ayla grow stronger together feels right, and he means to keep the story on its path. Clebius steps up with a renewed sense of resolve, setting the pace alongside Alvira Aniston as she realizes life isn't just about endless games. Lortel Ketchum stands quiet in the fading light, turning her thoughts toward the true cost of her choices. They gather together under the Sylvanian Academy's sprawling sky, all of the main characters carrying their own weight toward the prize. But Lortel pauses, catching sight of something unexpected waiting just beyond the tree line. Ed Roth Taylor checks his footing amid the rubble, stepping through the ruined Academy Hall where the wreckage of the Grand Chamber stretches out around him, because no matter how he turns it over in his head, something feels deeply wrong, and he knows someone has to shine a light on the hidden cost behind the protagonist's success. Pulling open the locker to find Janica Phalor waiting inside with a dark, unsettling laugh. To let the light shine on the main characters, someone had to stay backstage. Janica is at her limit, hiding in the dark and letting out a hollow laugh that doesn't sound like her. Ed looks at her and tries to find a cause. The answer is usually simpler and much crueler than anyone wants to admit. Lortel recalls following the girl home once and seeing the life Janica kept hidden from the rest of the school. It looked like the home of someone loved by everyone, filled with gifts and signs of sincerity. But the desk was buried under the weight of all those favors. The notes on her wall weren't support, they were rocks that finally crushed her. Solving Janica's problem should have been easy. She only had to ignore the gifts and notes on her desk, but her heart made that choice impossible. Janica felt a heavy need to pay back everyone who showed her kindness, and that sense of duty turned into a weight she could no longer carry alone. The demon Velis foresaw that opening and twisted her mind until she snapped, but it doesn't explain why her collapse is coming a full month ahead of schedule. During the joint combat training, Taylor stood as the designated hero of the scenario, but Lucy sent him flying in a single blow, leaving the students to quickly shift their support toward Janica Phalor. That sudden defeat happened because Lucy held a contract with Marilda, an alliance forged during her frequent trips to the northern forest, where she discovered the perfect place to sleep. The one who built that hidden refuge was supposed to have left when the first act started, yet Janica lingered there, admitting she understood why Lucy liked to nap in such a cozy spot and confessing that being forgotten by the others after all the recent chaos felt a little hurtful. After creating such a massive spectacle for everyone to witness, she felt sidelined now that the dust had settled, though Ed Roth Taylor pointed out that she had deliberately hidden herself so no one could find her, a point she conceded with a quiet laugh before admitting she had wanted to stay tucked away just a little longer. Ed asks why she is sitting like this, and when her raw admission lands, he stays silent while her exhaustion fills the room. As he looks at the blue wolf, the message finally lands that he has to save Janica before she falls into a trap of her own making. It is a strange bit of intuition from a spirit that picked him as the person she needs most. In the future, he knows, Janica tried to summon a high-ranked spirit in a hurry because she was pushed to work until she broke for her family. She hid her pain behind a perfect smile while the pressure crushed her in private. This is the moment everything turns. Paradoxically, Janica finds a strange kind of beauty in losing. The weight she's been carrying is gone, and for the first time in a long time, she can just breathe. She hears her name called out, and the person waiting for her is Ed Roth Taylor. He's pushed himself to the limit just to get here, offering her the validation she needs by telling her she's worked hard. High above them, the Academy's true main characters stand in the sunlight, soaking in the praise and applause of the crowd. They are the heroes of the story, the ones meant for the stage and the glory. But behind that stage, tucked away in the dark and quiet shadows, Ed stays right where he is. The world is cheering for someone else, but here in the silence, Janica has someone who sees the effort it took to get this far. Ed Roth Taylor accepts his fading role as the first act closes, reaching his absolute physical limit with a quiet groan of exhaustion. Through the shifting lights, he looks up and finally sees what was always there, while Janica Faylor breaks down in overwhelming relief alongside Marid. He never noticed them before, but now low-ranked spirits like Elgo and Driss crowd the space around him, drawn to a presence that has finally changed everything. Marilda stays back, but in this moment she can't look away from Ed while 10 days pass since the trial, where Janica admitted to every mistake and her friends refused to let her go down alone. They fought for her in the courtroom until the very end. During the trial, Princess Fania refuses to press charges for the attempted murder of royalty, testifying that Janica was possessed by Velosfer and did not act intentionally. Step by step, Lortella Ketchum steps forward to address the losses, with the Elte Merchant Association providing full compensation for restoration without demanding a return. They secure a clause to halve custom fees on the school supplies they distribute, leaving the Academy official to stamp the contract with quiet resentment. In any case, the outcome brings the removal of yearly top student benefits, the seizure of all awards, and disqualification from Ophilis Hall next semester. With 10 days of probation and 20 days of suspension, her expulsion is officially revoked. Janica's supporters celebrate, letting out a collective sign of relief, but Janica Failover looks heavier than usual, her shoulders carrying a strain her classmates instantly pick up on. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, they brace themselves to step up as they gather in the Academy tea room. They quietly coordinate strict ground rules to protect her feelings, warning each other never to bring up the Glaskin incident or pry into her personal well-being, keeping all talk strictly focused elsewhere. As the simulation ends, Clara checks in to confirm that Anis is prepared before the two turn their attention toward Janica Faylor in the Academy tea room, pushing her on the tangled line between liking someone and actually loving them. Anis is caught completely off guard by the sudden pivot, while Janica retreats behind a transparent cover story about an anonymous friend who had a particularly vivid dream. A girl with a crush is a dangerous thing, especially when she can't lie to save her life. Janica is lost in a world where the sun always shines, but a voice breaks through the dream and Ed Roth Taylor appears exactly how she wants to see him. Prince on a white horse. She places a crown of flowers on his head and laughs, then snaps back to the real world where her friends are watching her every move. Anis doesn't buy the story about a friend's dream for a second, since Janica spent her 10 days of probation entirely alone. Janica ends up describing every sign of her own crush out loud before shouting a goodbye and bolting to find any excuse to leave. As Janica waves a cheerful goodbye, Clara is left holding a secret that could blow the whole academy apart. She has to handle this with care because if word of Janica's feelings gets out, the student body will never let it go. She tries to calm her friend by suggesting she think the situation through, arguing that liking or hating someone is a mystery that doesn't need to be complicated. Clara leans in and tells her to be honest about these emotions for her friend's sake until Janica falls for it, praising her for hitting the nail on the head. She even warns Janica to watch how she talks about such sensitive topics to protect her reputation, and for now, the damage control works. Janica panics, but the rumors are stopped for the moment. Janica heads off to report her suspension, and Clara keeps up the act until she is out of sight and away from prying eyes. That's when the mask slips and she slams her head onto the table from the stress of holding it all together. How long can she keep up this lie for a friend who doesn't even see the danger? Janica Faylor looks for reassurance after the trial, while Ed Roth Taylor reflects on the money he managed to save before Phonia's petition waived next semester's tuition. With the gold coins left over, he invests in basic tools for survival on the academy grounds. Ed Roth Taylor knows he kept his distance for a reason, but now that the first act has finally closed, he decides it is time to take the initiative and greet Janica Faylor directly, now that her probation is behind her. The sudden attention completely shatters her composure, causing her to scramble behind the nearest tree in absolute panic before stammering out a rushed confirmation. Ed watches her awkward attempt to hide in plain sight until she blurts out an excuse about urgent business at Ophilis Hall and makes a desperate tactical retreat down the path. For someone as high-strung as Janica, social friction of this caliber is simply too much to handle, leaving Ed to stand alone with his crate and wonder if forcing the kind-hearted girl to be honest with him was a stroke of genius or a complete mistake. Deciding he has no time to be clingy with his own survival on the line, our protagonist finally turns his focus to building his hut in the northern forest clearing, marking day one by quietly picking a wide, shaded spot that won't attract unwanted attention. Day 3 rolls around, and thanks to his growing proficiency with Windblade, gathering timber goes smoothly. By day 6, he pauses work as his semester results arrive, revealing high practical scores and theory exam marks well above the freshman average. Instead of catching a rabbit for dinner, Ed finds the academy's most powerful mage caught in his trap. Ed watches as Janica sprints down the hallway in a panic. 18 days of hard labor have his lumber pile stacked high, and training his magic while he works is paying off. Once vacation starts on day 20, he pours all his time into the construction until the hut frame is standing. He heads out to check his traps, but instead of catching dinner, he finds Lucy Merrill asleep in the snare. Jerky was a bad choice for bait. Ed's plan to stay out of the spotlight is working, and as the actual protagonist of this world wins over the school, Ed's own social life is a disaster because Janica flees the second she sees him. By day 27, the senior maid Belle Maya delivers herbs and mushrooms to the camp, but she's more curious about why Ed thinks Janica hates him. The maid just tilts her head in confusion. Clearly, Ed's reading of the situation doesn't match what the rest of the school sees. 3 days later, Ed's attempt at building a stable shelter ends in a pile of lumber, and he realizes simple joints aren't enough to keep a roof up. It's a frustrating setback for his survival plans, but he doesn't have much time to dwell on the mess. He runs into Janica's group at the bakery, and the girl takes one look at him before sprinting away in a panic. On day 37, a student named Jix helps him with the roof and mentions that the hero Taylor is a good guy. Ed just nods along, relieved that the original storyline is still moving forward exactly the way it should. He might actually survive this. When Jix asks if they need to drive nails along the sidewall, Ed tells him to leave that section clear for the chimney, marked by a blade stuck deep in the ground as Ed finally steps inside his completed work. He drops to the floor, letting the sheer exhaustion of his accomplishment wash over him. The walls are built from crude, rough logs with not a single piece of furniture inside, but the roof holds firm, keeping the glowing forest insects locked safely outside. For the first time, he leans back and rests. Ed Roth Taylor finally finds a quiet moment to breathe in the northern forest, knowing he has a home now. As he enjoys the calm inside his log hut, Janica Faylor hesitates outside, searching for the right words before she speaks to him. Having finished the walls, flooring, and fireplace for his forest cabin, Ed Roth Taylor surveys his handiwork, deciding a fence and a firewood storage unit would complete the setup. His relaxation is suddenly shattered when Janica Faylor drops flat onto his makeshift roof, prompting an annoyed remark that this isn't a nap tower. Janica scrambles up to greet him, trying to play it cool while visibly flustered and sweating under his gaze. When Ed asks what brings her all the way out here, her nervous laugh gives away that her cover story is falling apart. Belle brings up Ed's campsite while brushing Janica's hair, mentioning that the view there was a total shock. Janica asks how the maid even found the place, but Belle claims she just happened to see the hut while passing through the woods. She admits that Ed built the whole thing by himself, and the quality is far better than she expected from a fallen noble. Janica is proud of his talent. Belle takes it a step further, saying she's curious to go inside and see how firm the structure is. Belle frames her interest as simple human nature. After all, any person would want to see how a place like that looks on the inside. Janica takes the excuse to heart as the perfect cover for her own prying. She insists her presence is only natural, but Ed doesn't buy the act. As a high-tier spirit medium, shouldn't her spirits have already told her? Janica tries to play it cool, but her stuttering gives her away as she claims she only heard a few rumors about his camp from people passing by, even though her spirits have fed her every detail about his body. Ed's doubtful question hits her right in the heart. She tries to put on a bold front, insisting she barely talks to spirits and has no idea how he really spends his days, but the lie is falling apart. Ed catches her off guard with a question she never expected, asking if she wants to come take a look at the log hut he built. The invitation lands, and for a second, Janica can't even remember how to breathe. It's a simple offer, but for her, everything has just changed. After a breathless run, Lortel lets out her pure excitement, completely bowled over by the sheer scale of the camp as the reality of her debts sets in. She spirals into guilt over the heavy price tag of her tuition and how she'll ever pay back the friends who stepped up to save her, until Ed shuts the worry down with his usual blunt practicality. Ed Roth Taylor questions the golden rule of paying back what you owe, leaving Janica Faylor stunned by a thought she has never entertained. It fits her perfectly, though she can never understand how the sheer weight of everyone else's sincerity became the burden that broke her. Even with supporters investing heavily in her tuition fees, Janica chose to leave Ophelis Hall and its state-of-the-art facilities behind for the outdated rooms of Dex Hall, all to owe a little less to the people around her. Where Ophelis Hall offers privacy, Dex Hall crams 8 or more students into a single space, forcing her to spend every waking hour performing the role of a perfect girl while surrounded by envy. For Janica, living like that is a prison that leaves her underlying issues untouched, proving the cycle is far from over. Janica offers Ed a place to escape the pressure of the academy, telling him that he is welcome to drop by any time. She sits in the silence for a moment before admitting how happy she is to be useful. She leans toward the fire and asks him to stop carrying every burden alone, and while Ed watches her, she promises to stand by him no matter the cost. It is a rare bit of peace for a man used to a life of fighting. Ed Roth Taylor turns the question over in his mind, processing Janica's confession just as the second semester approaches. That shift brings the start of Act 2, marked by the sage's sealed grimoire left behind by the great sage Sylvania to record aspectual magic, a high-level branch capable of altering the very principles of nature. Lortel inspects the worn book in its display vault, confirming her opportunistic instincts as she notes that it smells of money, bound to spark a storm that could devour the entire academy. Regardless, Ed Roth Taylor acknowledges the sentiment, drawing a firm line against any shared fate. He warns Taylor that the road ahead will be hard as hell, but offers quiet encouragement from the sidelines. Out in the rain, the honor students at Ophelis Hall are almost guaranteed a life like nobles. Heavy rain hits the velour area around the return to Sylvanian Academy, where Ophelis Hall students get carriages and boats while Dex Hall students trudge through the downpour. A student reviews a final draft and seals the letter while observing that the rain is coming down hard. Lortel sits in the dark and watches the rain. The merchant has already met with the student leader who hates the academy. Everything is moving exactly the way she planned. Willain is ready to pull the trigger for a group that has finally hit its limit, and he knows exactly how to make their anger work for her tonight. The plan rests on a simple paper about unfair treatment, and with the head maid on her side, Lortel is ready to push her move from the inside right away. At this point, the school's answer doesn't even matter because the mere talk of a solution is enough to start a fire that no one can put out, no matter what happens next. This fight is about to become the largest and loudest issue the Academy has ever seen. From here, everything only gets worse. Ophelis Hall was once filled with art donated by noble families, but now it's just fuel for the fire, and the Academy officials are feeling the pressure. It all comes down to the Sage's Sealed Grimoire, because the Merchant Association is using this crisis to gain an advantage in the negotiations. This book is essentially the heart of the school. Lortel watches the storm and notes that there isn't any light left. Lortel looks into the glass, haunted by the image of living in utter darkness, covered completely in dirt. The traces of conspiracy scattered across her desk are proof of a life spent in shadows, never showing sincerity and always suspecting others to survive. That is what she turned into. But beneath the filth, she searches for her own kind. Somewhere among the radiating people, she hopes to find someone who acknowledges a gutter rat's life, continuing an endless, quiet lookout. Lortel stands by the window, feeling the weight of her isolation as she asks why one's true self never changes. She reaches out against the glass, embracing her role as a calculating mastermind in the dark. Outside in the rain, the students explode with long-suppressed anger, demanding equality in their grades, while Willen incites the mob to action and demands answers from the academy. Inside Ophelis Hall, a rookie maid catches a glimpse of someone who shouldn't be there and turns to find her boss. She doesn't know it, but there's a lineup of middle bosses waiting on every floor to interfere. The first floor boss named Tote catches her before she can make a sound. He has been holding a grudge since a group of students beat him up for talking trash, and he's working for Lortel. Tote's role is to remove the witness and clear a path into the building. He hauls the maid away while she struggles to get free, refusing to give her an answer when she asks who he is. He launches a heavy strike until the doors fly open. The students are caught off guard. They surge forward as one when the massive doors to Ophelis Hall swing open, shouting for better treatment while they storm the building. While the crowd heads for the upper floors, Tote waits in the shadows. In the rain, a mercenary named Welaine asks if Lortel was the one who bought the man off. Ed Rothtailor confirms he is there to watch the first floor. This role was originally meant for a middle boss named Tote, but now Ed stands in the rain looking like he knows how much trouble is coming. Ed Rothtailor stops to ask himself the one question hanging over the whole room: how he managed to end up here. And as he rewinds the events from 2 days ago, the scene shifts to the Sylvanian forest where his combat stats lay bare his limits. A novice fighter specializing in a bow, stuck with low-tier proficiencies. He acknowledges the hard truth about his combat talent. Ed forces himself to pick up the bow every time he hunts, but after a full semester and half the vacation, his proficiency remains totally pathetic. Lately, the camp has started drawing attention, with more frequent visitors passing through the northern woods. A jogger greets him in passing, leaving our protagonist feeling completely exposed, especially with guards watching from the bushes as he tries to focus on his training. Among the frequent visitors to the camp, Ed Rothtailor counts 3 worth mentioning, starting with Visitor A, an extraordinary genius mage named Lucy Merrill, who drops in whenever she pleases. Finding a new door on the cabin only fuels her excitement for more remodeling, leaving Ed with no choice but to push her back out the window. That doesn't stop her from pitching a glass window and an extra skylight right through the roof, proving that dealing with her genius comes with a heavy dose of exhaustion. Visitor B brings a completely different energy to the cabin, arriving with a basket of fresh eggs from Belle and reminding Ed why having the second year's top spirit sorcerer stop by is a welcome change of pace. Janica Phaelor shares a trick she learned back on her family's farm, stepping into a wooden wash tub and explaining how boiled salted water helps clothes whiten up. Ed Rothtailor welcomes her frequent visits without a single trace of discomfort, getting used to her daily arrivals as she chats with spirits and pitches in with routine camp chores. His gratitude runs deep, prompting him to praise her knack for knowing how to handle everything around camp. But the compliment catches her completely off guard, leaving Ed entirely confused by her sudden flustered reaction until she abruptly changes the subject and asks how often Lucy comes by, her dark expression hinting that beneath her cheerful farm girl exterior, something else is going on. Lortel steps out of the moonlight and notices Ed is already tied up with other guests, and she walks through the mess of his previous fight without even looking at the arrows in the dirt. Ed's night gets even more complicated as his third visitor steps into the light. She tells him she's been waiting for him. She flashes a bright smile, but the golden daughter isn't here for a friendly chat because she needs his help for something far bigger. Ed watches her closely because he knows she's the hidden hand behind the coming chaos, likely looking for a way to occupy Ophelis Hall. This is the girl who breaks the academy later. Ed Rothtailor decides to stay clear of it all, walking away as Lortel Kalen calls out with an unwanted favor. But the timeline fractures right where Tote passes out, leaving Ed to panic as Taylor faces off against the students instead of taking a measured beating. Tote lashes out in pure fury, and a heavy blow lands straight across his face to shut him up. Jix vents his frustration, leaving Tote unconscious on the ground, while Ed Rothtailor notes that Alvy had never seen Jix lose his temper quite like this, confirming what Ed already suspected about emotional people. Lortel K. Helen lays out a simple assignment, telling Ed to take the key from Alice, enter Ophelis Hall, and open the door when the inferior students arrive, explaining that she cannot trust anyone else not to rat her out to the Academy's inner investigators. Ed realizes she chose him precisely because of his ruined reputation, as Lortel dangles the chance to get back at the Academy for kicking him out of Ophelis Hall, but Ed flatly refuses the bait. Still, Ed Rothtailor pauses to lay down his terms, offering to play his part in moderation. But Lortel K. Helen counters with a 20-coin price tag before things get any more distorted. With the clock ticking down to the outbreak of the Ophelis Hall incident, the occupation begins before the fight over Sage's sealed grimoire even starts. Ed Rothtailor sits by the fire and weighs the coming storm. Lortel K. Helen's financial scheme to reshape the Academy, a high-stakes collision between Princess Phonia's idealist student association and Lortel's profit-driven merchantry. He has no intention of picking a side early. He plans to stay back, watch how the power struggle shakes out, and back whoever wins, because survival in this place demands a pragmatic edge. But before the calculations can settle, Janica Phaelor rushes out of the downpour, looking for shelter from a rainstorm that refuses to let up. Sitting by the campfire under the pouring rain, Janica Phaelor talks about how easy it is for her to come and go compared to Ed Rothtailor, who is stuck holding down the camp even in weather like this. Ed just tells her it gets better with time, while Janica mentions that with vacation almost over, she needs to pack up her room at Ophelis Hall and throw out the extra things since Dex Hall turned out much smaller than expected. Seeing a chance to help out, she asks if Ed needs anything for his camp. Ed agrees, and Janica cheerfully promises to bring everything over when the new semester starts. Shifting gears, Ed asks if Lucy Merrill pulls her vanishing axe often, and Janica admits that she does. Looking up at the roof where Lucy stands alone in the rain, Ed reflects on the heavy price she pays for her immense power, noting how she uses laziness to run from her responsibilities and avoid her promised fate. Even someone as eccentric as her ends up forced to look back at her own life when the rain sets in. Ed waves a hand, dismissing the girl's chaotic energy, though Janica finds his absolute indifference to Lucy pretty amusing. But the tone shifts when Ed pivots to a quiet warning about Ophilis Hall's massive defense system locking every student down once it's breached. Janica could walk right through those seals without breaking a sweat, which is exactly why he needs her help tomorrow night. Ed sits by the fire, repeating Janica's mention of the rose garden in front of Ophilis Hall before she catches the romantic implication and stumbles over her words, leaving him entirely at a loss for how to explain himself. Figuring he needs to get her away before anything else happens, he tells her to stay close to shelter, prompting a flustered Janica to bolt away in a hurry. Ed lets out a long breath once the social exhaustion finally lifts, knowing the weather will clear by the time the semester starts. As the final days of the long break wind down in the Sylvanian Academy woods, Ed Rothtaylor sits in the fading light, fully aware that the quiet days are coming to an end. Down in his training room, as the clock hits 9, Jix Eifelstein pushes through another punishing workout, holding a grueling handstand as he replays his recent friction with Elka, reminding himself to keep his emotions completely in check. He drops cleanly to the floor, steadying his stance, before a sudden noise catches his ear. A lone figure moves through the dark, cutting through the heavy rain toward his target. There's no room for error tonight, and every step brings the plan 1 second closer to starting. Inside the hall, the hooded man meets with Alice to check if the other maids will get in the way and learns they are all trapped in a fake meeting, while the bought-off guards look the other way. He takes the gear she prepared and leaves it in a corner. Outside the hall, the quiet night finally breaks as the mysterious leader brings out his group of insurgents to officially start the occupation. Out in the courtyard of Ophilis Hall, a roar rises through the rain as the student insurgents demand an end to their unfair treatment and a guarantee of equal grades. Welaine steps up to lead the charge with total conviction, demanding that the Academy answer their pleas. The crowd surges forward toward the heavy doors. The doors to Ophilis Hall fly open as the mob surges inside with a shout. Welaine pauses to thank the contact who let them in. He wonders who Lortel bought off until he recognizes Ed Rothtaylor, who was waiting in the rain. Ed clears his throat and launches into the act of a lifetime as he explains that losing his home showed him how much he took for granted. He puts on a show to sell the lie until Welaine is moved to tears and admits he was a fool for ever believing the rumors. Ed gives the man a push toward the stairs and tells him to lead the charge, though in his head he just wants him to stop talking and move. This is a risky bet, but Ed just bought himself a clean path forward. Ed looks at Welaine and decides the boy will take the fall for everything. He feels a flicker of guilt, but he needs someone else to take the blame to keep his plan moving. Toughen up, kid. Welaine doesn't know it yet, but his life just changed forever. A maid scrambles down the hall in a panic, but he doesn't bother stopping her because her leaders are all trapped in the meeting hall with nobody left to warn. The pieces are all moving into place. Lortel has the chief maid under control, which means the very rooms designed to protect the students are about to become their prison. Inside the rooms, the students ask if things will go back to normal, having no idea the doors are locking them in. Ed watches the magic flare to life as everything moves how the scenario predicted it would. He's the only one who knows how this night ends. As Ed Rothtaylor identifies the mastermind behind the chaos, Lortel Cahellan steps forward out of the shadows, confirming that entrusting everything to him was the right choice, because the mastermind will finally take the stage. Sometimes a single question changes the whole room. For Ed, it's not the rain or the wet socks, it's the girl standing in the shadows who just asks if he's a murderer. Lortel steps out of the rain, complaining about her wet socks. Ed doesn't even blink because he already knew someone was watching him from the shadows. He calls her name, and she gets straight to the point about the deadline. The Academy will be here soon, so they need to move fast if they want to finish their work. Our guy dismisses her and tells her to do her best, but she stops and admits she has a question that's a bit out of the blue. She looks him in the eye and asks the one question that stops the room. Has he ever killed anyone? This is the moment where the masks come off. She's measuring his soul. Ed lets the silence hang between them while he figures out how to answer. Ed Rothtaylor answers flatly that he hasn't done anything of the sort, prompting Lortel Cahellan to laugh it off before her tone shifts entirely. Looking back at her brutal childhood on the streets where she had to crush others just to stay alive, she admits that she always struck first to avoid being betrayed. For years, she lived by forgiving her own sins, fully convinced she never had a choice in the matter. But looking back, she confesses that she was just making excuses for herself the whole time. To earn the name Golden Daughter, Lortel Cahellan stepped over everyone in her path, including her own father. Since she knows her choices are cold, she believes she doesn't deserve pity, yet she still stops on the stairs to call for Ed. She asks if he could ever find it in himself to care about a person like her. This is a rare moment where the girl who bought her way to the top finally looks for something money can't buy. She has never needed validation before, but right now, she searches for something her wealth could never provide. Loneliness cuts deep, driving people to seek out companions who will sink to the bottom with them, looking for a redemption that Lortel Cahalan bluntly rejects. Ed Roth Taylor draws a hard line, leaving Lortel to process the weight of his words before brushing it off with a calculated smile and returning to the scheme she came here to finish. Ed Roth Taylor steps into position, letting out a quiet breath as he tracks the narrative timeline, and handing command over to Welaine, the leader of the inferior students, so he can absorb the dense protection spells and transform into the fourth stage boss entity. Even if it means taking a few hits along the way, a necessary sacrifice to keep the story on track. Deep in the rose garden under a heavy rain, a carriage rattles through the grounds late at night, leaving Janica Faylor to wonder who could possibly be arriving at this hour while she waits nervously out of place, double-checking the note Ed left behind, promising he would return as soon as his work was done, her heart fluttering at the thought that he might have prepared something special. Sitting alone in the rain-slicked rose garden pavilion, Janica Faylor spends her nights consumed by guilt and obsessive thoughts, tracking Ed's movements through Marilda, while the high-rank wind spirit listens as other students like Princess Fania, Belle Maya, and Lortel make their way to Ed's camp, but second-guessing whether her Persian flower hairpin was a mistake, lost in nervous anticipation of what Ed might want to say to her. Ayla Triss hurries through the rain, hoping she can make it back in time, running with desperate purpose toward the academy grounds. Outside Ophelis Hall, Taylor questions the wisdom of going in there right now. Taylor fires back that the other students are the ones in danger if Elvira loses her mind and starts throwing chemicals around. As Taylor tries to hold her back, Ayla negotiates a compromise to get her straight to her room, and Elvira warns that she will force her way through anyone who gets in her path. Elvira stares down at the scene, her eyes wide with disbelief, right as Taylor steps up beside Ayla and snaps out a sharp warning at the figure sitting alone in the dark. The man in the chair sits completely still, waiting in the gloom. Elvira stays silent, watching the man with tight caution, as Taylor takes in the floor littered with the hurried footprints of students who had already swarmed through the hall, noting the smashed display cabinet and scattered debris, before he realizes the worst part of it. Ed has planted himself right at the base of the stairs, deliberately blocking the only way out. Elvira Aniston finds herself surprised at the Ophelis Hall entrance, leaning into the confrontation with a sharp grin as she asks if Ed thinks he can block their path. Ed draws a hard line, telling them that entry is barred. Elvira laughs off the warning, throwing back what she heard from Jix about his magic and questioning the point of his resistance. She dismisses him as a second-year rookie limited to basic spells, pointing out their group, a capable swordsman, an average first-year mage, and herself as the top alchemist of her year, before declaring it an overwhelming mismatch in power. Taylor wants the truth, but Ed isn't talking. Ed is taking a stand on the staircase, and he's ready to use every trick he has to keep the group from reaching the top floor. It looks like a standard fight between a mage and a swordsman, and the group thinks they have the numbers to win, but Elvira is about to see something that changes everything she knows about the boy in front of them. This isn't the Ed Roth Taylor they remember. Taylor demands to know what Ed Roth Taylor is doing and what's happening upstairs, but Ed only meets the question with silence, forcing Taylor to launch a charge with the rest of the group behind him. Ed doesn't flinch. He uses his magic to block Taylor as the swordsman smashes through the barrier while Elvira watches the exchange from the back. She assumes Ed will target Taylor first since he's the best at close range, but then she sees it. Everything she thought she knew about Ed was wrong. Ed Roth Taylor raises his hand to unleash his technique in the Ophelis Hall hallway, naming the spell right before it flies. The green blade cuts through the corridor, right as Taylor charges toward the obstacle, only for the trap's activation to catch him off guard. Caught dead in the center of the blast, there is nowhere left to duck. Taylor demands to know what caused the noise, but Ayla can only hunker down and pray the danger stays outside. She screams as the shot knocks her off her feet, forcing Taylor to check on her while Elvira ignores the pain until a blade of energy cuts the air and snaps Elvira's bag strap, sending her potion spilling across the stone. Every supply she prepared is gone. The real fight hasn't even started yet. Elvira Aniston finally realizes the gravity of the situation, wondering if there is really something going on in the floor above after all as she witnesses the heavy destruction surrounding her. Looking down, she notices her scattered supplies, the room completely wrecked. She staggers backward in vulnerability, just as Ed Roth Taylor springs his trap and issues a single chilling command. She braces herself for the explosion as the trap triggers. The battlefield takes shape like flowing water, trapping Lortel in the wreckage as she faces Ed Roth Taylor's precise judgment. The protagonist confronts him and points out that key details were left out. This goes far beyond standard high magic proficiency. Amid the wrecked interior of Ophilis Hall, Lortel Kalin finds herself cornered by Ed Roth Taylor as she faces the reality of her position as the alchemy faculty's top student. The faculty's biggest flaw is simple. Without elixirs or magic tools, their raw combat power drops to zero. Most students carry a protective ring or necklace, but her arrogance had dismissed the hassle. The full depth of his planning hits her all at once when she traces his moves, dropping the chandelier just to secure an opening for a firewall straight toward her bag. Lortel Cahellan traces Ed's logic through the chaos, calling out to Ed Roth Taylor as he readies a spell amid the flames. Reaching for her trump card, she summons a rabbit spirit to the floor and prepares to apply a fire-resistant formula, pushing it to go berserk and amplifying its strength. The spirit charges straight through the fire, leaving Ayla Triss to panic over a spell to put the flames out, trying a defensive spell as the hall burns around them. The hall burns around them, trapping the air in a thick wave of heat, and Ayla Triss breaks under the pressure, shouting out in pure panic as our protagonist moves to cover her, telling Ayla to get her act together because while she knows her magic theory, her combat skills are average at best. With the enemy locking onto her, the protagonist can't even close the distance or find a way out of the corner, leaving him to call out to Taylor and ask if he can take the target down from close range. Elvira Aniston makes the call and lets the spirit loose, triggering a roar as the creature lunges toward the protagonist, who stands his ground because his own survival doesn't matter anymore. That grit is exactly what Elvira wanted to see, and she pushes deeper into the flames while Ayla calls out her name. Then the impact lands, and everything disappears into the smoke. Whatever was standing in that hallway a second ago is gone now. Lortel Cahellan gloats as she gathers her tools, asking if anyone missed her short time away. Ed Roth Taylor focuses his mana for a counterattack alongside a rabbit spirit, unleashing his spell with a sharp cry of Windblade as the exertion hits him. Lortel braces against the incoming wind, remaining calm and calculating beneath the pressure before invoking release magic and launching a counterspell with a glowing potion. Lortel throws her plan into the air and tells Ed he's late. The glass shatters, releasing a reagent that transforms the moment it meets her magic. Ayla watches as the alchemy suppresses the room, stripping away magic formulas and forcing the giant rabbit spirit to buckle. Ed drives his blade deep into its back until the creature finally collapses, leaving our boy to stand over the body covered in blood. He looks more like a seasoned soldier than a student. How does a man who supposedly can't use magic end up being the most dangerous person in the room? Lortel Cahellan urges the team forward, and Ayla Triss cries out in shock as Ed Roth Taylor makes his move. Zix Effelstein watches in confusion as the protagonist retreats into the hall. Ed focuses entirely on his next tactical play, slipping through the doorway to execute a sudden sabotage that leaves Zix reacting to the shifting environment. Zix braces himself for the impact, but Zix regains his composure, gripping his sword with absolute faith that his elemental slash can cut through fire or oil alike. Zix commits to one final strike to end the fight. Lortel screams for him to stop, but he's already moving too fast to listen. But mid-swing, the layout of the room starts to feel like a setup. The window is open wide enough to vent the smoke, and the carpet has been moved so a fire can't spread. This wasn't an accident. Every piece of this battlefield was stripped down on purpose, forcing Zix to ask the only question that matters: did Ed Roth Taylor really plan all of this? Lortel Cahellan screams a desperate warning across the hall, but Ed Roth Taylor stays completely locked onto his target amid the burning Academy Hall, closing the distance as Zix Effelstein charges straight toward him. Zix halts with a start when he sees the weapon, shouting that he'll deflect it, yet stops dead in his tracks with shock the moment Ed releases the precision shot. The projectile streaks past, and Zix realizes with a jolt that he was never the actual target, leaving Ayla Triss frozen entirely in terror at the end of the line. Lortel knows Ayla is a sitting duck without any basic magic to defend herself. The girl freezes at the sound of her own name and braces for an arrow that never arrives because it was blocked at the last second. Lortel mutters about how close the call was while she drops to her knees to catch her breath, and her hands still grip the claw hand, a specialized tool built to snatch distant objects in an instant. Lortel senses that Ed's attack is off, and when she sees the arrowhead wrapped in cloth, the trap reveals itself. He doesn't want to kill her. This is the moment the whole fight has been building to. He closes the distance and forces Taylor to brace against the weight of the blade. Then a loud noise echoes through the hall. He knows his window of survival just got a lot smaller. Clebius Nortondale isn't just running. He is unhinged. He's lost to a panic that finally breaks him out of his prison. Back in the hallway, Ed Roth Taylor barely hangs on as he tries to catch his breath, but the piece ends when Clebius lands a heavy strike that sends him flying. Lortel watches in shock as Ed crashes through the air, coming to a stop against the shattered stone while she wonders what it actually takes to kill a man like this. The hallway is a wreck of burning furniture and scattered scrolls. Zix slams Ed Rothtailor against the wall and grips his shirt to demand an answer. Lortel watches them and admits the whole fight feels like a setup, noting that if Ed wanted to win, he could have attacked while they were trapped. He chose to stand his ground and stayed focused for the entire fight. Zix shakes him one last time to ask if he is done, but Ed just stares back with vacant, glowing eyes. Exhausted and bloodied, Ed Rothtailor dismisses the group, leaving Zix Effelstein completely baffled by the sudden withdrawal. Outside the clock tower, Elvira Aniston cuts through the confusion to demand why she and her team were allowed to win. Zix refuses to believe they were ever spared, but Elvira presses harder for answers. Behind Ed's calm exterior, his true nature surfaces while Elvira burns with aggressive suspicion. Ayla spent the whole night awake and restless, picking out the flower pin for her hair. It was a signal of permission for the boy she was finally going to meet. She wanted to believe her feelings weren't just a naive dream, because everyone should be free to hope for a little happiness. But the reality waiting at the pavilion is a nightmare. The boy she expected to find is slumped against a wall, broken and covered in blood. This wasn't supposed to happen. Ed can barely find the breath to speak while Ayla realizes that her own friends actually did this to him. This is the moment everything turns, and as Ayla Triss looks at the person who did it, she demands an answer for what they did. Everything they worked for is gone. The note in Janika's hand says he'll be late, but she admits that something about it feels wrong. Maybe the protagonist got swept up in a situation he didn't expect. She thinks back to his simple life in the woods and how he handled the chaos of the hunt, remembering how hard he works even when no one is watching. No matter how big the trouble gets, Ed has a way of making people believe he'll figure it out, earning a quiet kind of trust just by showing up. He's the only one who can walk into a disaster and make it look like part of the plan. Ed Rothtailor accepts the weight of his choice, while Taylor demands answers with force, remembering a time when Yenneca Faelor offered her unconditional help. But Ed never asked for help, choosing instead to keep her clear of the fallout from the Glaskin incident. Yenneca realizes the care behind his distant actions as dark fury takes hold. Taylor calls out to her, relieved she avoided the chaos at Ophilis Hall, while Lortel Kellen senses the overwhelming danger radiating from her and tells Taylor to snap out of it. Lortel Kellen calls her out straight, but Jannika Faelor answers with an eerie, detached honesty about what they are all trying to do, dismissing the group as irrelevant annoyances as a massive surge of power rolls through Ophilis Hall. Ed Rothtailor desperately tries to reach through to her, but Jannika only offers a terrifyingly calm reassurance, leaving Lortel and Ayla Triss utterly stunned by the sheer magnitude of power filling the room as feathers and debris tear through the air. A glowing bird flies past, while Yenneca Faelor stands surrounded by powerful spirits. She calls out to Ed, telling him to wait a minute. Lortel Kellen watches in disbelief at the battalion of intermediate and lower spirits. Lortel tells Taylor they have to leave because they cannot get past her, noting how hard they struggled even against a fallen aristocrat. The Academy official notes the top student among the second years of the whole Faculty of Magic, leaving Yenneca Faelor lost in a trance of overwhelming power. Elvira Aniston urges Taylor to pull himself together and face reality, telling him that since the windows broke, they should head that way. Taylor accepts the harsh reality, knowing that students might get hurt because of this. He refuses to leave Elvira unable to use her precious herbs, and as Elvira screams his name, he steps forward to face an impossible clash. Pushing through physical agony, Taylor grits his teeth and forces himself onward. Taylor yells for them to leave right now, but the second panel cuts away into a flash of motion as Ed Rothtailor cuts through the chaos, telling Taylor to listen carefully. Ed tells him he will take care of Jannika, urging Taylor and the others to head up to the second floor just as they planned. Ayla Triss demands to know why he's changing his tune after stopping them earlier, but Ed insists they get up there right now. Lortel Kaeli mocks him, laughing off the idea that he can stop the spirits while covered in scars, before a sudden impact cuts her short. Ed Rothtailor is bleeding out, but he still stops to apologize for tearing Lortel's bag before she grumbles and follows his lead. It's a small moment that shows exactly where his head is. Taylor and Ayla Triss charge into the hall while Jannika Faelor stands lost in a cloud of dark energy until her focus snaps because she sees Ed standing right in front of her. He is the last person she expected to see in this state, but he just tells her to step aside so he can finish the fight himself. Ed Rothtailor warns her that such an action is usually a sign of disrespect, stepping closer to physically assert his presence, while the heavy air inside Ophilis Hall presses down. Yenneca Faelor stares in shock at his proximity, but Ed tells her he's fine, and asks her to tone it down now. Yenneca lets out a total cry of confusion, stammering as she points out his hands on her shoulders, while Ed asks her to send the spirits away because the wind is too strong for him to stand. Yenneca Faelor stands frozen in disbelief, while Taylor and Lortel Kehelen stare at the sudden shift in the room, gasping as Ed Rothtailor pushes himself up past his limits and tells her to move. He loses his footing, collapsing to the floor with a final warning before his energy gives out completely, leaving Yunika to scream out his name as the storm rages outside. Yunika tends to the heavily bloodied Ed in the corridor, asking him to promise he will stop getting hurt, while our protagonist figures he has done enough as the first floor boss to finally return to his camp, until Yunika mentions a massive carriage. A golden crown catches the light, worn by the man who pulled Lortel out of the ruins of her own family, scheduled to arrive much later in the game's timeline during the second act's final struggle. Golden King Elte stands before him, but his presence here at the Academy ahead of schedule signals a dangerous break in the narrative script that reaches far beyond anyone's control. Inside the Ophilis Hall corridor on the fifth floor, Lortel Kihelen touches the windowpane and asks Alice if she knows about being dumped, mentioning the stern-looking guy they met at camp, and admitting that despite his looks, she feels a strange kinship with him because he shares the same cold edge she sees in Alice. She regrets letting her guard down and showing such vulnerability, recalling how Ed Roth Taylor coldly told her to take responsibility for her own choices before dismissing her without an ounce of mercy. Acknowledging that people like them share a certain isolation, Alice quietly agrees that it is a familiar burden they carry all their lives. Alice didn't start at the top, but that reputation had a price. Lortel spent a fortune bending Alice's ironclad values until they finally snapped. Lortel tells the woman she's lucky to have her around, having found someone of her own kind who would dump a lifetime of beliefs for a chest of gold. This is the only way a person like Lortel breaks her solitude. She surrounds herself with people who know that in this world, everything is for sale. Lortel rises above the desperate scramble around her, fleeing for her own safety while calculating every move. Welaine, the representative for the inferior students, is set to take over the fourth-floor control room at precisely the right moment to hand over the command of the Berserk defense magic, destroying Ophilis Hall from the inside out without ever realizing she is being used. Safe in her duplicity, Lortel prepares her mask, noting that everything is going according to plan as she heads toward the storage room to play the part of an innocent, terrified student who stumbled into hiding. Savoring her superiority over Lortel Kihelen, Alice delivers a cold transition, leaving Lortel frozen by the sheer proximity of the blade as overwhelming mana closes in. Outside the tower under the rain, Lortel Kihelen watches the clock and notes that at this rate, it won't take long. Inside, Taylor overpowers Clebius, the second-floor boss, forcing the defeated student to join his party. Betting washer Kelly tries to block them on the third floor, apologizing to Miss Alice for failing her task before falling to the protagonist's superior force. With the party moving smoothly through the raid, they push forward toward Ophilis Hall. Ed Roth Taylor remembers how brutal the first floor was, while Lortel lets out a terrified scream. A sudden threat forces Taylor to shout an order to run as Lortel screams for help. The hall's best shield just turned into a nightmare. He is not a boss anymore, he is a battery. Welaine screams for mercy as the magic of the building begins to tear into him. He is supposed to be the fourth-floor boss, but right now he is just a human battery being used to fuel the defense system. These magic formulas were originally meant to protect the students and keep the building safe. Now the power is out of control. It is like a child holding a loaded gun. The person pulling the trigger has no idea how much damage they are about to do. The magic explodes outward, forcing Taylor to stand his ground and shield the others while they struggle to stay on their feet. Outside, the storm rages against the hall as the building turns into a cage for everyone trapped inside. Alvira Aniston and Clebius panic as the Ophilis Hall corridor shakes around them, wondering where the maids are as things spiral out of control. Students shout warnings to get out, using their powers to escape the collapsing building in their own ways as the situation turns into a catastrophe. Taylor asks Alvira if there is any night butterfly flower reagent left, but Alvira explains that the rune is already carved and useless against it, opting for a quick rebound with angler weed reagent instead to block all basic magic within this corridor, deploying the countermeasure just in time. Alvira Aniston tells Clebius that the magic is purely assistive, shoving him forward into the fray while demanding he go after Welaine, leaving Welaine completely overwhelmed by the terminal output. Destructive energy radiates outward as Welaine reaches a point of manic desperation, whispering in sweet relief that the end has finally arrived before the corridor erupts in a massive blast. Yunika finds Ed out in the storm and tries to shield him with her cloak, warning him that his wounds will reopen if he keeps pushing his body like this. He brushes her off, telling her that most of the blood on his clothes belongs to someone else. Ed barely hears her as he watches the road, his mind stuck on one question: how? He's waiting for the massive carriage that finally rolls through the rain toward the academy grounds. Even with all that gold, the carriage looks plain compared to the man sitting inside it. This is the Golden King, Elte. A man of his power usually travels with a massive group of guards, so this quiet arrival says everything. He has a secret reason for being here. He doesn't want anyone to see him coming. Elte burns the paper trail behind him to ensure no evidence survives his presence at the academy. Lortel and Ed stand out in the rain, where Ed realizes the timeline doesn't add up because the carriage has been sitting there far too long. Ed stares at the figure under the umbrella and asks who that person could be. Shenny steps forward from the shadows to execute her secret role. Ed Roth Taylor finds it strange that Shenny is running with Elte, Lortel's enemy, knowing full well that Shenny would never betray Alice, unless the dynamic is entirely reversed, and Alice is the one backing Elte instead. The whole board points toward Lortel's downfall, a massive problem since Lortel handles the political fight against Phonia in Act 3, before becoming the protagonist's biggest ally against the Roth-Taylor family in Act 4. Standing in the rain facing Golden King Elte, Ed refuses to carry a mess this large, having already struggled just to take Willane's place as a middle boss without having to play Lortel's role too. Ed Roth-Taylor catches Yenneker Failover's attention in the rain, hesitating as he admits he needs help with something he cannot handle alone. But before he can finish explaining, Yenneker steps forward and asks what she needs to do. A mysterious burning letter arrives with a single word: greetings. Confidential papers burn away to ash. Lortel Kehelen secures a dangerous alliance with the business magnates to oust Elte Kehelen from the merchantry, while Elte moves with lethal purpose alongside his mercenaries, walking straight into a trap. Through a lucky break, Ed now holds the one piece of paper that can ruin Lortel's entire plan for the academy. Loyalty follows the gold in this world, and since the merchant lady already made him a massive offer, he has no reason to switch sides for nothing. Our boy is playing both ends against the middle. Survival isn't about being good, it's about being expensive. Then there's the secret of the chief maid. Alice is fading, her sight and hearing failing after years of service, and Ed is the only person who sees the cracks. He knows his next move decides everything. One choice could save Alice or destroy Lortel, and the weight of that power is finally starting to land. This is the part where it gets ugly. Alice leaves a paper attached to the letter detailing the institution she has secretly managed all this time, warning that the flow of gold coins from here on will dictate her next moves. Standing in the corridor at Ophelis Hall with a blade held close, she evaluates Lortel Kehelen's resolve, noting that despite the talk of revenge against the Golden King Elte, the two of them are not all that different. She admits that the same goes for her as well. Just before an explosion tears through the hall, Lortel Kehelen dismisses Willane as someone who could never reach defense magic, pointing instead to the chief maid, Alice, and catching Alice completely off guard. As Taylor rushes forward to check if Lortel is alright, Lortel revels internally in her scheme to frame Alice for the whole mess, prompting Elatrice to recoil in horror as she stares at the disturbing expression twisting Lortel's face. Lortel Kehelen rushes through the corridors of Ophelis Hall as word arrives that the Golden King Elte is coming himself, unwilling to trust even his own henchmen with the situation. The plan to overthrow him is nearly complete, pinned on framing Elte for massive account tampering, leaving Lortel to simply reach the headquarters officials while he is away. Finding the hidden carrier pigeon and slipping away into hiding should keep the center of the plan safe from capture. Moving fast through the stairwell, Lortel tries to steady the disappointment of knowing there is no one left in the world who understands. Betrayal is an old, familiar expectation, and so the final steps forward begin. Lortel Kehelen decides that getting her heart broken at this point does not suit her at all, so she has to do what she can. Right now, she needs to run and get to her room before Elte does. Everything will be fine if she just sends the carrier pigeon. At the same time, down on the first floor in the main hall, the situation shifts. Elte Kehelen advances toward Ophelis Hall surrounded by his mercenaries, stopping to size up an unexpected obstacle as he asks if the boy is a student and tells him to evacuate before offering a smooth professional lie about the building being closed due to the risk of collapse. Standing his ground despite his injuries, Ed Roth-Taylor blocks the way and warns that no one gets through until faculty and staff arrive, prompting Elte to test his authority by asking if the academy gave him special instructions, to which our protagonist replies that he is acting entirely on his own since Sylvania operates on a shop system. Ed evaluates the board from his unique perspective, noting that there are 3 people fully aware of the story's flow, including Lortel Kehelen, who aims to oust Elte, avenge her childhood, and empty the president's seat for the mercantry, while Elte himself is entirely determined to thwart those plans and succeed in purchasing the sage's sealed grimoire. The whole mess traces back to Alice, the root cause of this twist, who is currently on the 5th floor with Lortel. While her betrayal makes no sense, I still have to decide if I should be the one to stop her. As it turns out, the answer is no, because the scenario says Taylor's party will run into her even if I stay away. I'm leaving her in their hands, letting Taylor take the front line against her blade while Elvira brings the fire from behind. I can trust them. Taylor throws his whole weight into this charge, looking like an unstoppable force while his team backs him up. But Ed doesn't flinch. He blocks the strike with a steady hand, knowing exactly what the boy can do. Ed knows he has to stop them right here, no matter what Elte has planned for the hall, because even if blood catches in his throat, he just needs to keep them out for now. He wipes his mouth and acts surprised, asking why a merchant leader would show up in person. Elte Kellen tries to smooth things over with a facade of concern, suggesting they talk with the academy first to make sure Ed Taylor gets the respect he deserves. But the moment Ed's true allegiance becomes clear, Elte drops the pleasantries entirely, realizing the protagonist has chosen Lortel's side. 10 minutes ago, the stone walls were splitting under the force of the impact. Ed and Janica stand in the middle of the wreckage, watching the hallway crumble as dust fills the air. Ed notes the mess, but he stops when he sees a student who seems calm despite the danger. He asks Ziggs why he hasn't escaped yet, but the student keeps doing one-handed push-ups and says the falling building won't kill him. He sounds like he believes it. This man treats a collapsing roof like a minor distraction. It is a level of strength Ed cannot imagine. Ziggs complains about the broken wall and how cold it's going to be when he sleeps, leaving Ed Taylor staring at him in disbelief at how little he looks like a mage. When Janica Faylor arrives, Ziggs properly greets her and brings up their rough encounter during the Glaskin incident, but reassures her that she already served her punishment, throwing Janica into a complete panic while Ed brushes off the rude question. Ziggs offers a sincere apology for overstepping. Ziggs is confused by the effort, asking why Ed would tear down a wall just to reach him, but Ed doesn't have time to explain. He just tells Ziggs he needs a favor he promises to pay back later. Ed faces down Elte Kehelen in a trashed hallway and tries to stall the merchant with a weak play. Elte sees right through him and realizes Ed has already picked a side with Lortel. He asks if our protagonist is really loyal to someone who might not even pay him, warning that the girl is a fox who will stab her friends in the back. Finally, Elte offers to double Ed's pay if he just steps out of the way. It's a massive offer, but Ed isn't the type to sell out his allies for a few coins. Ed Taylor politely turns down the offer, pointing out the flaw in the logic since no gold coins were ever promised in the first place. Elte Kellen pauses to calculate his next move, before deciding words have failed him and ending the negotiation. Reacting as the mercenaries lunge forward on Elte's quiet order to dispose of him. One of the masked figures shouts out to his allies as Ed moves, but he unleashes a hidden trick right as the trap closes in around him. Alvira steps forward to cover his exit, and while Ed doesn't let his pride stop him, he knows he needs Lortel's information more than he needs to prove he can fight. Ziggs just tells him to go since he's the one in debt anyway. Elte warns his men to stop holding back because these students are more dangerous than they look. Ed sprints into the shadows while the hall erupts behind him, focused on finding Lortel so he can finally get a straight answer. This is the part where it gets ugly. Ed is barely standing, his face and shirt stained with blood as he limps through the hall. Ayla stares at him, stunned that he's still inside, but he doesn't give her time to process it. He asks if she can run and warns her not to fall behind, because they have to hit the back door before the building collapses. It turns out that even here, kindness usually comes with a hidden motive. Sharo the receptionist plays the part of a friend only because he wants Lortel to leak a secret by mistake. Kadan is just as friendly, but he only waits for the next tip she might drop. Teeny clings to her finger not out of affection, but because the feed she provides is of the absolute highest quality, at least in Lortel's world. Ed and Lortel are running down the hall when Ed reminds her that Alice just betrayed her. Lortel takes the blame entirely on herself, calling it a stupid, foolish mistake. She contrasts her own cynical nature with Janica Faylori, who grew up receiving so much love and goodwill that she treated the entire world the same way. Lortel knows she is nothing like her, and that day, she made Ed Taylor an offer. Janica watches Ed with quiet affection by the campfire, completely unaware that Alice stands at a distance, her presence radiating a cold, menacing aura that weighs heavily on Lortel Kehelen as she wallows in self-loathing. Lortel mentally lists the 5 assets she bought off to occupy Ophilis Hall. Chief Maid Alice, the twin maids Shenny and Kelly, student representative Willaine, and the fallen noble Ed Taylor. Kelly carries out her role in the shadows, while a terrified, bound Willaine looks on as a dazed, injured Ed asks a quiet question. Lortel experiences an unexpected pang of guilt, apologizing to Ed even as she questions why she feels sympathy for an ally. Lortel admits she can no longer pay the gold she promised and starts talking about giving up, but Ed shuts her down by asking if he even asked. He grabs her arm and tells her they have to escape before they can plan for any future. Lortel looks at him in shock, watching as he demands the full truth until her guard finally drops and she admits her father is rigging market prices through the main branch. Lortel Kehelen explains how armor prices dropped after the monster hunt last summer, leading her father to monopolize the supply, but Ed Taylor dismisses the long explanation as simple price manipulation. She confirms that he needed quick cash, sold the sage's grimoire, and sent her to steal it, which Ed understands completely. He breaks down the classic method where merchants monopolize a cheap product and trade it among themselves to fake a price hike. As the price skyrockets, panic sets in until people feel they have to buy it immediately. Selling the stockpile at that peak yields massive profit, but the scheme requires total trust because any partner selling behind the other's backs will burst the bubble instantly. Ed identifies L.T. Cahellan's fatal weakness, having overextended himself to corner the market. If his partners betray him, he loses everything. Lortel stands with calculated confidence, but Ed Roth Taylor lays out the entire puzzle piece by piece, leaving her stunned by his insight as she wonders how he figured it out. That leaves one clear move, and Ed drives the resolution. They need to get a message to the Merchantry's headquarters to sell the armor. Lortel points to the carrier pigeon in her room as her direct line of communication, though she warns that her father is likely expecting that exact move and plans to capture her tonight. Ed takes a second to gather his thoughts before giving Lortel her instructions. She has to stay hidden from now on because he already knows the spots where the enemy will be waiting for them. If they send an empty carriage toward the mountains, it will lead the trackers away from their real path. Lortel asks where she fits in, and Ed points her toward an unfinished hut in the North Forest to hide for 3 days. He will use her pigeon to trigger her allies at headquarters, then grabs her shoulder to force her into motion before their window closes. He's already doing the math: 1 decoy, 1 hiding spot, and 1 message to turn the tide. Ed Roth Taylor warns her about the guard at the back door, telling Lortel Cahellan to stay put while he secures the outside, but she can barely focus on the instructions. She pulls herself together enough to answer. Yet before he leaves, she calls out to him, asking the question hanging in the air between them, why he is going so far out of his way to help her. Ed stops at the heavy question, leaving the silence to stretch. Ed can't find a logical excuse for why he is putting himself on the line like this. He admits he doesn't have a grand reason, and he tells her that he was acting on instinct. He walks out of the room and leaves the weight of that answer behind, and once the door clicks shut, she is left in a silence heavier than any deal she's ever made. The rain hammers against the window while she stands there, until the rush of emotion is too much to keep her standing. It is a moment that changes everything for her. Her pulse is thundering in her ears, drowning out the sound of the storm outside. Lortel Cahellan tries to pinpoint the source of the vibrations echoing through Ophilis Hall, wondering if it's the final clash between Alice and Taylor on the upper floors, but quickly realizes the sound is coming from somewhere much closer. She searches for the source in total disbelief until she realizes the frantic rhythm isn't coming from the halls at all. It's her own heartbeat pounding in her chest. Outside in the pouring rain, young Master Ed emerges unexpectedly, catching the attention of Maid Shenny. She watches him with a cold, lethal focus, her glowing yellow eye fixed on her target as she acknowledges the sudden arrival. After everything it took to get here, Ed expected much more from the final wall standing in his way. He looks at the blood on his hands and wonders if this was the best they could do, because the massive takeover he spent so much energy fighting against has finally reached its end. For an obstacle that was supposed to be his greatest challenge, the whole thing just felt bland. It's over. Every single rune inside Ophilis Hall belongs to whoever holds the command, pointing straight toward the swordsman who once traded blows with the combat faculty students and held her ground. She wields intermediate magic without a single flaw, locked dead on her target, Chief Maid Alice. Despite all of that, he's already calculated the way through. As the tension peaks across Ophilis Hall, Taylor McClure launches a decisive high-speed charge, closing the distance before anyone can react, his blade flashing under the dim lights. Ed Roth Taylor delivers the verdict. She couldn't defeat Taylor McClure because he is the main character, leaving Alice to brace against the inevitable clash as their swords lock in a blinding explosion of sparks. The impact sends shockwaves rippling through the hall, sealing the outcome of the battle. Alice hasn't moved yet, but her grip on the hilt says everything. She's waiting for the one mistake that ends this. Ed stands across from her as the rain blurs the space between them. He's down to his last scrap of mana, with maybe 2 or 3 basic spells left before he's empty. For the MC, the math is simple. 1 miss means he has nothing left to defend himself. The silence breaks when she kicks off the ground and lunges with enough speed to end it in one clean stroke. A single arc of light cuts through the dark and Ed catches the full force of a strike that should have finished him. Alice reacts in shock as Ed Roth Taylor intercepts her move, recognizing the pattern of her attack with absolute confidence. As she tries to recover, Ed seizes total control of the exchange, executing a high-speed takedown that leaves her completely helpless against his momentum before she stumbles back in utter disbelief. Alice reaches into the bond she was born with and calls on her twin sister's power, creating a circle of glowing blades through a shared talent she can only use once a day. The magic slams into Ed's chest and pins him hard against the wall while Alice leans in with a smirk, sure that the fight is finally over. But then she sees something that shouldn't be possible and the smile dies on her face. Ed leans into the fight, his eyes lit by a cold power that says he isn't playing around anymore. He weighs the stinging cuts on his arms and sees that the power these maids are using is sloppy. Their borrowed abilities aren't deep enough to end this. He slams his opponent into the whetstone and holds her there. The weight of his grip holds her fast no matter how she struggles. A single heavy kick sends her rapier skidding across the courtyard, and Ed drops the final verdict. That's it. The girl screams in failure, a raw sound that cuts through the rain, while Ed counts the time. Reinforcements will be here in 60 seconds. He has no time for her tears. She begs him to move, shouting that she can't disappoint Alice, but the door is already closed, and he doesn't know it yet, but this one maid's loyalty is about to make the rest of his night much harder. Ed Roth-Taylor delivers a cold tactical truth, stating flatly that Alice will lose. A maid hits back, defensive and indignant, demanding to know what he even understands about her. She pushes the point, asking if he knows the pain Alice has endured and the battles she has fought. Alice unleashes overwhelming force, driving the magic forward. The maid testifies to her nobility, asking how many orphans Alice has saved. The maid reveals her own personal debt, admitting she is one of those orphans, while Ed acknowledges his ignorance, realizing the script of The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania left out Alice's background entirely. The clash between them is fueled by a lifelong debt she can't repay. She screams that a normal life was never an option, and it's clear Alice is the only reason she's still breathing. Without her master, she wouldn't even have a way to feed herself, and that kind of devotion creates a wall that won't crumble easily. Ed listens to her reasons with blood on his face, but knows she is fighting for a person who doesn't exist. He lets the silence hang for a moment. Ed Roth-Taylor stands his ground over Alice, refusing to bend as she struggles against him in the rain, her voice cracking with betrayal as she asks how he could ever side with Lortel. Behind them, Ophelis Hall burns into the night, the flames consuming the only life she thought she knew, while Ed looks down with cold detachment, calculating the true weight of the losses today and the complicated ledger of Alice's life before it ends here in the mud. Those who act on philosophy have lives worth living, but for our protagonist, the goal remains unchanged since he first possessed this body. It's to survive. Then the system interface delivers its verdict, a new skill unlocked. Ed Roth-Taylor feels the bitter irony of unlocking pain endurance right when he can finally use it, just as something shatters the window glass and forces its way in. He catches his breath after a frantic entry into the dark Ophelis Hall office, his senses sharp as he scans the room, taking in the luxurious wooden furniture and necessary decorations. Papers pile high on the desk while books sit neatly in straight rows, and looking around, he knows this meticulous order suits its owner perfectly. Hidden away in the dim corner, a carrier pigeon sits quietly in its golden cage, waiting in the dark. Ed Roth-Taylor notes that Elte is currently in Sylvania, issuing orders to sell all acquired gear while a carrier pigeon flies through the rainy night sky toward what he expects will be Elte's defeat. After a brief transition, Ed pushes forward through physical exhaustion, wondering if his cuts will heal once his flesh mends. He reflects that without Jix, Janica, and a few opportune moments, Lortel would have fallen swiftly to Elte, but now her hired carriage is speeding out of the Arkan Mountains, leaving Elte no choice but to chase her. Even if Elte captures the coachman and forces a confession, our protagonist knows it is already too late, because the carrier pigeon has flown, leading straight to Lortel Kehelen stepping out from the shadows with a cold greeting. Panic hits as he realizes he let his guard down against the Golden Daughter herself. Right now, only the 5 bribed individuals know Lortel is pulling the strings, meaning Alice will have no choice but to lean entirely on her once Elte is out of the picture, leaving Shenny, Kelly, and Willaine to fall right into place. To a girl like Lortel, Ed Roth-Taylor is a variable she just can't figure out, a man who doesn't seem to have a price or a simple reason for anything he does. Out in this far-off part of the woods, she could get rid of him and no one would ever know, giving her the chance to commit the perfect crime. This is the real face of the girl behind the scenes, a secret leader who treats every person she meets like a tool to be used and thrown away. Ed knows he has to use his head to survive, but as she stands over him, his body just won't listen to him anymore. She draws her blade, and for the first time, he feels the weight of the end. She rips a strip of cloth from her own clothes and starts wrapping it around Ed's waist. She asks why he did this as she stares at his blood-stained shirt and sounds scared to see him this hurt. The rain has stopped. She pulls him toward a small cabin where a fire is already burning to keep the cold away. She looks up with a rare, soft smile. She tells him they should get warm together in a quiet moment where she lets herself be the one he leans on.